Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 345. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You Know. On this episode, we are joined by inker Juan Castro and friend of the show Darrell Taylor as we discuss Juan's work on Arrow number 20 and also Batwing number 16. In a special bonus segment, we are joined by Jim's niece, Cassie Segulin, as we discuss how she became a comic fan. We discuss her love for Batgirl. We also discuss, we had some speculation. This took place before the end of Death of the Family, so you get to hear us kind of speculate on where we thought the ending was going to go, which is kind of funny to see. But also, we talk about Killing Joke, which you just read for the first time. So it's a really packed episode, and we hope you enjoy it as we prepare for our next episode, which is going to be our 7th year anniversary episode. 346 is going to be the Raging Oscars, which we're going to take a all-encompassing look at the DC Universe. And we've been working on that over the past couple of weeks, so that's why one of the reasons why this show was a little bit late. So thank you for your patience. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, we're talking about Arrow on this episode, and you can pick up issue number 7 for $2.39. They also have Batwing number 20, which we are also talking about on this episode. So make sure to check out both those books if you haven't been a regular reader. Remember, DCBService.com is your discount pre-order source. They are a Comixology digital partner. They are a Diamond and Iverse Media digital partner. Every one of those purchases earns you 5% towards your DCB service order. Over at InStockTrades.com, you want to make sure to check out the Batwing trade paperback, Volume 1, The Lost Kingdom. This is $14.99 regularly, 45% off only $8.24. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping, so make sure to go to InStockTrades.com. It's a great way to stock up on your favorite hardcovers and trade paperbacks. So I want to thank both DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Oh, James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring, and in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Joining us on this episode is longtime friend of the show, Darrell Taylor, and new visitor to the show, Juan Castro. And Juan, you are the inker on issue 20 of Arrow, the digital series. And I shouldn't just say the digital series because it is then later released in print. But I focus on the digital end of it because I love this delivery. To me, I look forward to every single issue. I think it's just a great way for fans to get like an immediacy. I like the weekly book fix. So it's an honor to have you on the show because we've only had one other inker on the show. I'm insanely excited to talk about what the creative process is like for you. So welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. Yeah, working on Arrow was a lot of fun. Issue 20 is my first one. I also did issue 24, which should be out really, really soon, like a week or two from now. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, any questions about the process you might have, I'll be more than happy to answer.
When you're doing a book like Arrow, you're dealing with a book that's based on television actors, where you've got real people acting out the roles. Is it hard in the creative process when you're dealing with, instead of a hand-drawn character, you're dealing with an actor and actresses and characters that are established that way? Do you feel, how do you deal with that? Because I thought this issue looked really great. I love the series, so for me to have this extension of it that felt so good was something that I really wanted to touch on. So what is that like for you on the creative end?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complex than working on your like normal comic book. I've had some experience in the past working on licensed stuff. I also did some Farscape comics in the past and stuff like that. So you definitely have to pay a lot more attention when you're doing this because if something doesn't look quite right, you'll hear from the licensing people right away. I got to work with Victor Jorginho on this issue, who's an amazing penciler. So We had a lot of back and forth conversation about like what approach he wanted me to take. It also helped that the series was only like 6 or 7 episodes in when we got the gig. So I just had to basically watch all the episodes like in one sitting before I started the book, and then just took a bunch of screen caps and kept those handy next to my drawing table. Just as a reference point.
Do you like working with licensed characters?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because, working in comics, I've only been working in comics professionally for like the last 5 years, and I've seen the evolution, in the mainstream, basically, of people being more aware of comics. But a cool thing about working on licensed stuff is that I can actually tell people what I do for a living and they know what I'm talking about. Because in the past I would be like, oh, well, I do comic books, and they're like, what? But now I can be like, well, there's this show Arrow, maybe you heard of it. Yeah, well, I do a comic for it. Or like Batwing, it's like the Batman of Africa. Or G.I. Joe, everyone knows G.I. Joe and Transformers and stuff like that I've been lucky enough to work on. And it's also really cool, like, as a fan, like, oh, I really like this stuff, and now I get to be a part of it.
That's got to be a neat thing when you land a gig where, it's like, this is something that I've really been enjoying already. Does that make more pressure, though, when it's something that you're already into?
In the beginning, yes, but lately, it just makes it more fun. I guess in the beginning when I had I wasn't maybe as experienced or something, I would kind of overwhelmed sometimes, but I really don't want to screw this up factor. But now that I'm a little bit more comfortable with my work, I just kind of enjoy it a lot more. And there's no better feeling than when I get, boxes of comps and be like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I was buying this anyway, and now I get it for free.
One of the things, and this is kind of a roundtable one for everybody else to talk about. Guys, what is your relationship with the TV series Arrow, and then also the relationship with the comic? Because one of the interesting things about this book is it's available in multiple formats. It's available first as a digital release, then it's released as a paper comic. Which version do you get? What helps you make the decision for the version that you get? Darrell, we'll start with you first, buddy.
I kind of went straight digital with this, especially with the Legend of the Dark Knight, and then they do the Superman Beyond and the Batman Beyond, all that stuff. I just been enjoying a lot more of it. Just getting it digitally every week.
Jim?
Well, I was always the traditional paper, and I wasn't even doing any of the digital reads, and I picked up this issue digital. And I was like, it was actually kind of neat and fun reading, and it was usually I have difficulty sometimes when I'm reading the digital formats, but this one just kind of flowed through nicely, so I picked up the next issue digital, and I'm going back and I'm picking up the back issues digital, and I think some of these comics are probably just going to go straight. I'm going to start picking up more digital format. I'm going to stop going with just the paper style.
Juan mentioned that he did kind of an Arrow marathon to get himself going on this. But what's your guys' relationship been with the show, just for the listening audience? Darrell, are you a big fan of the show? Where do you kind of fall on it, or are you...
I kind of went all fanboy on it. I was in from the beginning. I went to the panel at New York Comic Con. I got to see the actors that play Ollie and Dinah and her sister Speedy. They were there, and Mark Guggenheim was there too, and Jeff Johns. So I kind of was all in from the beginning.
Jim?
I'm jealous. I wish I had been there for that one, for that panel. That sounds like that would have been an awesome panel.
It was. I wish you could have saw it too. They were very nice.
Oh man, I'm from day one with the book, with the TV series. I'm all in on this thing. I'm absolutely loving it, and the comic is also something I'm getting just that same enjoyment I get from the TV show. I'm also getting that from the comic, and that's something I was very pleased at, because I was worried, how is this going to play out? How is this going to happen? I had good success with the Buffy series. I had good success with the Smallville series. But there's always still that animosity, that concern and fear when I'm going into something that's based on this other thing. Like, how is this going to be? Is it going to match up to what the standards I have? And this is something that this comic is equaling and matching up well with the TV show. So this is a very happy. It's add on a little more extra stories. More gooder. On the Arrow. I gotta have at least one punctuation. Or
punctuation.
I have to have at least one error like that. Come on.
You
If
don't.
not, the teachers who listen won't have a reason to yell at their
It's like
iPods.
It's like scratching nails on a chalkboard. Juan, a question I have for you. It's one of the things I'm loving. I'm with Darrell. I'm loving the digital format. And I've really embraced this kind of delivery on this. Now, see, I got my urge. This kind of delivery. For you as a creator, like, do the pages look... like, for us, we get, like, this half page... which I really like the way it's formatted for my iPad. You know, I turn my iPad sideways, and I'm able to kind of scroll across sideways. And I really feel like it takes full advantage of screen formatting in the way that it's laid out. So, for me, the artwork. I want to see the artwork. I want to see the details. I like being able to pinch out and scroll in and really kind of take a look at the intricate work that you guys put into all this. But does it look like for you like a regular comic page, or what does that look like on the creative end when you get it?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that because I have a funny story about the art on this specific issue later on. But yeah, basically we do the art the same way, 11 by 17, but the penciler just has to be extra conscious of the way he lays out the panels, that he doesn't have any overlapping panels. So when the page is split into two, there's not like a little piece of another panel in a frame, basically. But the reason we do it is because then when it goes to actual print, it's going to be like a normal comic book with like a full page. So every 2 pages of the digital are just 1 page in actual print. But there was a mix-up with the formatting of the files on this issue where they printed the wrong files of the inks. So the version you're seeing when you mentioned the intricacies of the art, I felt a little heartbroken when I saw it because you're seeing like 40% of the detail I put in.
Wow.
And I'll show you guys later some of the like original art next to it. I was showing Darrell the day it came out, and like they're like, "Don't worry, most people won't notice." But I'm like, I know, but I do.
I think that's great, though, because there's a lot of things that you guys do as creators that we don't notice because we're not artists, but I appreciate. Like, I thought the artwork in this was beautiful. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And to even think that, like, you were going to take it further, or I shouldn't say you were going to, you had taken it further, is interesting to me because of how much I really enjoyed the visual look of this issue. And I got to commend you on it because for me, I share the sentiments of both Darrell and Jim. The show is easily my favorite show on television right now. And it's not because it's a DC show, because that's not what drives that. It's, I've got my favorite, I love Person of Interest. There's all kinds of shows that are on that I'm really digging right now. But when Arrow came out, I was really worried because I enjoyed Smallville so much. I loved the Green Arrow character on that. I am so glad they went in this different direction, a unique direction just for this program. And I feel like the great thing about this comic book is it's so tied into the program, but it's also not forced to be like a rehash of the episode. It's taking a look at side stories that there's really not time to tell and kind of expanding our understanding of, like this one with Ollie's reaction to this whole Robin Hood thing. I'm not Robin Hood. But then you got a guy coming in who misunderstands him. Obviously, he's dressed up in green. He's got the whole Robin Hood vibe going on as far as his whole look. And it's interesting in this show because of the fact that he hasn't really got a code name other than, the Hood, the Vigilante, and all that kind of stuff, as far as the police end of it goes. There was even a joke in the series about the name Green Arrow. But that hasn't been, anything hasn't been established as far as what his actual name is. I love the fact that we're playing off of this Green Arrow theme because that would be my first thinking when you got a guy running around the city, saving the city, attacking the rich because of the way that the book works. And I love that this story was being told in this issue because it was a really nice done-in-one, focusing heavy on his own thoughts on how people would be viewing him. Because before, his mission, when he started off, was so centrally focused on, I've got to get this revenge for what happened, for what my dad did. Not revenge, this redemption, I should say, for my dad, for what he did in the past. And this is my chance to make his thing right. There wasn't a lot of thinking about how the general populace would view him. As the series has evolved and developed and his missions kind of started to go beyond his original edict, we've seen him start to care about what matters. And I love that this is an expansion of where I think the show has evolved. 20 issues into this series, we're seeing it continue that evolution in a way that I think is very complementary to what's going on with the show. So thematically, I really enjoyed this issue because it focuses on him, it focuses on the supporting cast, and I think a theme that's very interesting in the show, where this is a character in one season that isn't even done yet, has not stayed stagnant at all. He has grown a great deal in the time we've gotten to know him.
That's one of the advantages of having like people from the writers' room be plotting the comic, where it's like they can use the comic as a way to expand their universe, instead of like other comic adaptations we've gotten of TV and movies that are basically a rehash of the same thing. Here, and especially like in the issue 24 they also got to work with, it's nice because they get to branch out and touch on other characters that maybe they can devote a lot of attention to on the show. So that's really, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I like that you're right, that everyone from the writer's room is there, because it really does feel like this is something that adds something. I think we as fans have started to demand more from our tie-ins. I think in recent years, books like Jim mentioned Buffy before from Dark Horse. I'm a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. I loved the TV show. And I thought that their comic book adaptation, where they continued with another season, I thought was just a really great template of how you do great comic tie-ins. You take something that worked on television, and then you give us something new, something fresh that has the same amount of depth as the TV show. Arrow's doing that for me. And I think that's something that's really strong and really important if you want an attach rate to a series, especially when you're doing some interesting things like this, like experimenting with the weekly digital release and then doing the paper release along with it. I think it's really important because you have two potential audiences to hit there, your traditional comic fans, and then that fan who's become a real diehard fan of the TV show, who maybe doesn't read comics, but it's like, ooh, there's an Arrow, here's from somebody, there's an Arrow comic, and this digital might be their first comic book or their first comic book in a while. Because this series, I've got friends of mine that I work with who are not comic fans at all that are digging this series on a deep level because it's a great action drama. And I think it's a really cool way to, we keep talking about different ways to bring people into comics. I think a quality comic like this is a way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been like a big proponent of digital comics. Like, when the first generation iPad and Comixology came out, I remember having like these long talks with Darrell where he kept saying he would never buy a digital comic, and now like 80% of his purchases are Comixology.
Yeah. It's a crazy thing because, when we were started, no apologies, when we were doing it, I was always no, I can't do digital. I'm traditional. I do paper. That's all I want. I can't read it off of a screen. And Juan was always talking about digital. I buy digital is easier and blah, blah, blah. And now everything I get almost, I still get DCBS. I still get a lot of comics in paper, but I'm constantly buying a lot of digital stuff too.
I like that you can be buying from your store of choice. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm obviously DCBS is a show sponsor for us as well. And I like that I can like click on from their website and some of my purchases going towards them. I like that aspect of it. I think it's really important. So that's something that I was hoping would happen with digital. I didn't think it would. So I thought that was really cool when they decided to go that route.
Going down $1 helps a lot too, to try things that I didn't try when it initially came out.
Yeah, that after 30 days deal that they do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish more comics would do that.
So do I. I think a lot of purchases that people have made, that I talk to that are not, they don't do comic stores, all the time, or they're not into comics as much. And, I tell, like, I got a few friends to just try a book just from telling them, it's on Comixology, just check it out. Just go out there and check it out. And they bought it and loved it. And then they wind up going and they either go to a comic shop or a convention, or, they'll go and buy the physical because of the digital comic.
I like when they do the bundles.
Yeah.
Like a traded bundle, like on the digital end, because for me, when it's a buzz for a comic, I like to kind of jump in and read not just one issue. Sometimes I like to read like 4 and 5 in a sitting just to kind of get a vibe for, what the book's all about, where the creative team's going, the art direction. Sometimes, it takes me, especially if it's a different sort of art style, it takes me a couple issues to kind of get into the storytelling that's being told there. And that's always a great way to get it as well. I'm sorry, Juan, you were going to say something too?
Oh no, yeah, it's also made it a little bit easier for me to justify double dipping on some stuff, because sometimes I would get the issues and then this nice hardcover would come out, and I would still buy it, but feel bad like every comic geek, but I would still buy it. But now, like, I have the digital files, and it's something that I really, really enjoyed. I don't even blink twice at then later buying a hardcover of that or something like that.
No, I like the sales too. Like when they'll run periodically a digital sale, where you can get like large runs of something at 99 cents a crack.
That's great.
I went crazy with the Morrison sale, and I own it. Like, I'm mad at myself because I own the physical copies of like Batman and Robin after reading that the latest Batman Inc. And I just was like, I really want to read all that Damian, Dick Grayson and Damian working together. I want to read that year of books. And once I saw that thing in the morning before I went to work, I just started hitting the buttons, and I bought the entire 99-cent run of Batman and Robin. One
of the things that I really like, I'm looking at the artwork here, and we've got the opening sequence where Ollie's talking to Felicity, and kind of this money's falling from the sky. And I loved seeing the action sequence and all that, where we even see the old lady going crazy. Because that would be if that much money was coming out of the sky, there would be like rioting in the street and stuff. Because especially nowadays, if you think about where the economy is, and just people's general, even if people are doing the same as they were doing like 5 years ago at this time, there's still a vibe of where the economy's at. So there's a mentality that is constantly, we're constantly getting hit with about, the state of the economy, needing money, where things could possibly, like there's a lot of gloom and doom about where things could possibly be heading. I would see this happening today. It was a very contemporary, I thought, opening.
I love getting the scripts, and just getting through, reading through them. And immediately when I read that scene, I'm like, this is going to be awesome to draw. Because how often do you get to draw or ink a random old lady punching someone in the face with a purse?
And that's a really cool look on her face. That's a kind of warrior look as she's bashing the dude with her purse. That was just that was one of the panels where I stopped and I was just kind of staring, and it was just the humor of the moment was not lost. I was like, that's kind of cool.
I liked her trophy stance. Like afterwards, she's holding her purse up to collect the money, but it's almost like, yay! What do you guys think of the Arrow costume, the whole look for the TV show? Because it's kind of, to me, been like a hybrid of what's currently being done with Green Arrow, classic Green Arrow with the hood, and then a little bit of the Smallville version thrown in. What do you guys think of that look and how it works on television and how it works in comics?
I think it works well because when I look at him on screen, and he mostly fights regular people, regular bad guys or whatever, and it doesn't clash. Like, it doesn't look so out of place for him to be, running around in the suit. It's dark enough, but it still has the green in it. The hood is a natural look. So it just kind of works with the way that they film it at night.
I personally really like it because it looks like something believable that, like, a guy today, if he wanted to be a vigilante, he could easily put it together himself. And it's also practical because, the leather protects you from, like, falls or something like that. And it still has that thing, like, I'm sure you guys read the Jock Green Arrow series.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me a little bit of that since they started Out of the Hood recently. So I really, really dug that.
Yeah, believability is a cool part of the costume, and just, functionality, and just, this is real life. I could see, an actual person. Now, part of me does, I still want the big goofy looking goatee that could easily identify him in the real world. But there's just something about that classic look. I do want that, even if it's just a comedic nod towards the look or just a brief moment. having the character have it or whatnot. But it's not something I'd want long term or something, an ongoing thing. But I don't know, just something I'd like the nod.
I don't want it at all. Unless it's like going to a Halloween party or something like that, and he happens to wear it. They do a great job in the show of doing nods to comics, and I think it's something that's absolutely brilliant about the show. From street names to names of certain characters to, I love the constant nod to comic creators. I think that's just a really, really cool thing, especially like O'Neill and Adams and stuff like that as they go through. Yeah. They've done nods to Andy Diggle, obviously. One of the things that I really like about this look and why I'm surprised because I'm a traditionalist. I love the whole goatee look and stuff like that in the comics with the character. But I've come really accustomed to the oversized hood covering his face and the shadows being a reason why nobody recognizes him. And I really like that from a realistic standpoint. I genuinely believe this guy would be able to get away with what he's been able to. Because it's so, the way he operates is so hit and run. He's moving so fast. There's very little chance for people to get a bead on his actual face. And any time, even if somebody snapped a picture of him, that hood is so obscuring physical facial features because it is oversized, including down to, the way it, wraps around the sides of his face, that I think that obscuring of everything is just so fantastic that it doesn't bother me that he doesn't have an actual mask. He does the paint. I think that works really well. It just all seems to mesh well together, and I feel like I'm getting though the Green Arrow that Jim's talking about, where it feels like it's Oliver Queen, like it's my idea of who Oliver Queen is as a character. I think they've really done a nice job of making it feel like something that's actually happening in the real world. It's believable to happen in the real world, and that's something I just think is great.
Yeah, I also love it's just a cool visual, and from an art point of view, it gives you an interesting texture to work with every single time you have to do it. So that's a really nice side effect of having the hood in there too. Now,
I would think the scruffy, unshaved face would get a little annoying. Going, okay, little line, like that.
Things like that. I use some pens that aren't really even made for art. They're made for architecture and stuff like that, and which help me be so detailed. And those things are kind of fun because you get to play around with shape. And by doing those lines, if you turn them and twist them the right way, you get to establish the shape of the face and some depth into there. So it is a little bit time consuming, but it's at the end, whenever I'm happy with the result, I kind of forget how long it took me to do and forget that it was annoying while I was doing it.
Because this is a digital, being released initially digital comic, is there a different, just attack plan, layout, or just a different physical way you're handling your end of the artwork?
Not the physical pages themselves, but definitely in the way that I have to scan in the pages and submit the files. Because you have to fit them to different templates and very specific file formats and resolutions that sometimes with print you get to do something a little bit more different. But yeah, that's really the only way it changes, If I was working on something like an oversized graphic novel or something like that, it would definitely affect the way I would ink. I would ink in maybe not 11 by 17, but maybe a 13 by 18 kind of paper. But since this is digital and it's also going to be print, it doesn't really change the process.
As an inker, when I'm looking at the helicopter chasing, the news helicopter chasing the plane scene where they're trying to get the story and everything, and one of the things I really loved about this scene is it's three great panels of really terrific motion. I'm looking at the helicopter, the motion of the helicopter clearly speeding along as fast as it can towards this plane. That's the big story, because they want to be the one to scoop and get the story of what's going on. You've got Ollie hitching a ride and trying to get over to the plane, and then you see the shoof of his device, his grapple. When you receive scenes like that, and you have to enhance the motion and things like that, are those scenes harder to do than something more static? Or, how does that work on your end with the inks? Because I really loved the sense of urgency and movement in those panels. And it was something that really struck me as I felt like this was really happening.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely a lot more time has to go and thought has to go into every line I throw, because the way I try to I establish the dimension on like the city shots and all that is I have to keep very much track of how I do the dimension of the buildings. So I separate them by blocks, basically, like if this was a 3D space, and then use different light weights to establish the dimension there. And then as you get closer, obviously the lines get thicker so that your eye sees a little bit closer, it gets a little bit more detailed. And that's stuff that it's not really there in the pencils, and it shouldn't be because, well, some pencils are very detailed, but they shouldn't, you know. I love working with a penciler that trusts me to let me add my own like touch to it. And Victor is really, really cool to work with. I've worked with him on some other stuff. But yeah, it's like a matter of just keeping track of all of that more than you would on a like two people sitting talking page. And also to get like the motion, just know where to use the right brush and know where to like fade the lines just so that your eyes mistake like a line getting thinner for a blur effect kind of thing. So yeah, definitely a lot of thought has to go into those type of pages.
One of the things that like I'm always fascinated about is the behind the scenes, the creation process, just the everything layout. And it was something, through the podcast that I've actually learned to, understand a little bit more and appreciate is the inker penciler kind of relationship. And I always wonder about just do you guys sit down and have those, side meetings where like, hey, I got this going on, I'm thinking this, or is it just a kind of okay, here it is, knock it out?
I've had, it depends on each project. I've had like both those scenarios where it's basically like, here are 10 pages, have them ready like in 2 weeks, and that's it. But on this project, there was a lot of feedback, like with every single page, basically. I would turn it in, and before the editor even saw it, I would send it to the penciler, and he would be like, okay, this is perfect, or could you like maybe tweak this little thing that I didn't have time to finish drawing? So it was a really cool working relationship. But yeah, I've definitely had both scenarios, and when I'm in constant touch with the penciler, it's definitely a much better result.
Well, and it's funny because earlier you had said that, about with the final copy, the final version of the inks and whatnot. And when you said that, I was like kind of a little bit, what? Because this one page we've been talking about has been one of those pages I really wanted to talk to you about, just because I loved how we had this up close action, but then you can look in the far landscape, you can see the details of the cars, you can see the money still flying out of the back of the plane. And this was one of those pages where it's, you sit there and you stare at it for a little while and seeing all the little nuances that you guys threw into it.
Thanks. But yeah, I'm looking at them now and I sometimes kind of forget like, man, I that must have taken me a long time to do, and I didn't realize when I was doing it. Sometimes I add more detail than it's there, and I'm always like wonder if I'm crazy for adding more stuff that's already there.
You were mentioning just as a creator what it's like when you get done with the project, and just on this one you were mentioning how like there was ink work and things that I had done more of that I wish been a part of this. As a creator, do you ever feel like, because you guys are on these crazy tight deadlines, it's literally like you've got to make certain sacrifices on maybe what you'd like to do just because you've got to get in and on time, which is an interesting balance. Do you ever feel like you're done?
No, never. And this is a philosophy I adopted from Mike Norton, that he's like, you have to realize what's good and what's good on time. And so, like, I could easily spend a week on a page. But with production schedule, at the most, I get a day with each page. So I just have to do the absolute best I can with the time I'm given. But yeah, like, for example, I've heard you guys on the show mention a lot of Kickstarters in the past. And Sean, I believe you were one of our supporters on Molly Danger. And since we don't have a strict deadline on that, I've literally spent a week on a page. Just because I get time to like let it breathe and then walk away from it and come back. But yeah, when you're on a deadline, it's just has to get done on time.
That has to be really rewarding when you get to work on every so often a project like that where you can spend a little bit more time and polish it the way you want to. Because I'm a big fan of the weekly releases. I'm a fan of what you guys do in order to make. I think it's an art to be able to make creative choices where you can say, this is my priority when I'm inking, to make sure that this part looks the best. And this motion, this action has to play out the best. And I would love to do this other piece. I might not be able to. But at least if I get this sequence in and nail it just right, this is what I really want the person reading this and being a part of this experience, the emotion I want to invoke. And I really think that that's a skill to be able to do that, especially in the case of something like this where you've got a high-action TV show that is really good on character drama, but it cooks, it moves. And I felt this issue did that as well, with the right balance of the meaningful moments between Felicity and Ollie, where you're getting that character development that I really like about the show, but then you're getting into this kick-butt action where, like, Ollie's landing in money, and you're trying to find him, which I thought was great.
Oh, yeah, that panel, that let's just say that the finished version you're seeing, it's like my third or fourth draft of that panel. So it's like, well, it looks good, but the editorial was like, I kind of can't even see the character. And then, more changes, get the whiteout pen and the brush with white ink out, and then it's like, well, now it's too bright. So, like, finding the balance on that panel was very interesting.
When you're looking at this sequence with Ollie falling out, this is another action sequence that I really appreciated. Basically, his nemesis on there realizes that this is a great way to take out my competition, or his perceived competition. He opens it up, and Ollie's firing the grappling hook again. When a character does that, a multiple motion sequence, is there a lot of pressure to take a look at each of the panels and kind of see what does his costume look like in the first one, how to kind of match that up so it feels like it's that same character and that he doesn't look jarringly different as he's turning? Because I really appreciated that. We see him from the back, we start to see him falling from a different angle to the front, and then as he's twisting in, when we see the grapple go out again, I really felt like there was no point in time that I felt like he was a drawing. My mind was filling in the little character motions that was going on, and I thought that was something in that sequence. That was a page that stood out for me. When you can in your mind picture the character twisting and turning, even though you're not actually seeing that, I think that's a trick that you guys are able to pull off really well when you pay attention to some fine details. Is that hard to kind of balance that, or what does that look like on your end?
It's especially when working with characters that are so detailed, because again, Victor deserves most of the credit on that stuff, because he's a really great penciler and very photoreal. But yeah, sometimes I would get a note oh, you only drew 2 arrows on his wrist and there needs to be 3, and so I have to go back and fix that for continuity's sake. But especially because this was the first time working with the character, but on the issue we did after that, we were more familiar with the character, his design, and the model sheets. So it gets easier as it goes along. But yeah, during the first couple of pages, it's always a little bit of a bumpy ride.
So even the backdrop of the city, it just looked the buildings. Y'all did a great job of showing that it's at night, but you could feel the wind when he's falling down, and how the buildings are getting closer and closer because he's about to drop near them, and even the boots, even the detail of the bottom of his boots, how the traction he has. You even put that detail in. Yeah,
the thing with working with Victor, who's such a photorealistic penciler, is that the pencils he gives me are very, very nice and clean. So, when I'm doing that, the details pretty much already there. My job with him is just to, I explained when I was doing the cityscape, to just help separate and create dimension and movement to it. But yeah, most of all the detail, all that credit goes to Victor, because he's really, really good at paying attention to that kind of stuff.
You mentioned that you've been doing comics for 5 years. What do you think you've learned the most as an inker about when you approach pencil work when you get it? Because I'm sure that along the way you've learned lessons, picked up new tricks. What do you think has been the best thing you've learned in the last 5 years about starting to approach a new project like this?
Yeah, the best thing I guess that I've learned is that every single penciler you work with, you have to approach different, because you need to tailor your style to what works for them. Obviously I have my own kind of style, and some people can look at a page and detect that it's a Juan Castro page just because mostly there are other artists and they see a lot of my process and all that. But I just try to mold my style to that specific. And sometimes, like I mentioned, Victor's very photorealistic and very detailed. But then there are other pencilers who are extremely loose, and Darrell got to see some photos that I showed him, some test shots, where a friend of ours, Chris Campbell, was like, "What does that little squiggle on the top of the page mean? Oh, it means I have to draw the explosion that's supposed to be there." So it varies a lot, and that's the main thing. Just have a different approach for everyone, and have the best possible communication with your penciler.
Yeah, it's something with Juan. How long we known each other, Juan? Like 2 years?
Like 3, yeah.
That was 3. And I swear, every project he gets, I know that he makes like it's his first project. The way he's so careful about it, and he wants every page, every part to just looks the best that it can look. Like I've known him. Like I went to sleep, and then the next day I get a message saying, "All right, I just finished."
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of those. While he slept, I finished an entire page.
Yeah, and that's just amazing for somebody to care, like to really care about what they do. We know. I mean, all of us have heard many artists that we know who are the same way. Jamal Igle, Mike Norton, Freddie Williams. They will bust their behinds to finish a project, and they don't care. It doesn't matter how long they've been in the business. They still have that sense of pride in every book that they work on, which is always nice.
I've found that I've come to really appreciate, you touched on something, Juan, that is something I really love about comics. When creators take a look at a project and say, I need to change up what I'm doing to match the theme and the tone of this project. To me, I've come to really appreciate the journey. When I can pick up a project like this and feel like I'm being pulled into a television world where, normally this is live action with actors and we're seeing stunts and things like that. When I can feel that same emotion from this comic and it feels like this could easily be a television episode, that's important to me. And then we can see something, we're going to talk about Batwing in a little bit, which to me it's a very different process as a reader, because that character has always been a comic book character. The things you do, the little tweaks you make, not being an artist myself, I don't always catch them. Where I catch them, though? I catch them emotionally in where you take me. And I think that's really the important part of the process. It's where did this issue take me? And it took me to that place, which is really great.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely if I do my job right, my goal is for you not to notice it, because if you notice, people will mostly only notice it if there's something wrong with it. That's just how our eyes are trained, basically. So that's the best possible compliment. Thanks.
The way Juan changes to fit whoever he works with, Juan is I know for from experience, he is a team player, and I think inkers don't get the credit a lot of times for how they come in, because they don't get the headlines. They don't really get the shout outs when people talk about a book. They usually talk about just the penciler and the writer. But I learned over years how important inkers and colorists are, because when something is wrong, that's when you notice that not everybody was on the same page.
I tend to think more creative team now. It's funny, Darrell, that you're mentioning that, because I don't think that I view... When I read a comic, I find that I appreciate... My favorite comics are the ones where I appreciate the experience. And I don't think you can look at the experience without taking a look at every person who's worked on that project and kind of saying, the reason why the book worked is because everybody just kind of delivered, or, the right people kind of adjusted things and it all just kind of worked out at the end the way that it was supposed to. So I tend to think more creative teams now than I do individuals. And I think that's something that I'm doing more and more than I consciously realize, just how much I really enjoy. I tend to look back when I'm done reading an issue, more so than I do at the beginning, to see who worked on it, because I think it means more to me after I've had the experience to kind of connect with the production team on it. I ended up going back and rereading it right away, just because I really enjoyed the whole experience all the way through, which I typically do with my digitals. I think it's just because of the delivery. But this one, it really, and I'm not just saying because you're here, it really captivated me with the action sequence that was presented there. I think for me, it's that sense of height and the intensity of, like, this guy could have fallen at any point in time, and it's that split second. There was a bunch of split second moments from how he got on the plane to how he got off and back to, like, saving his life again. There was a certain James Bond, like, intensity to this, where it felt like, the stunt scenes were still going on, which is, I think, really important in a television program based comic.
And he didn't look superhuman.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
I like when he finally gets back on. In case you are wondering, this is my gig, because it seemed to be an ongoing theme from him from the beginning. In general public with Felicity, to when she calls him on it again, when this guy's like kind of been revealed as a Robin Hood type of character, that's not my gig, to this guy when saying, are you upset at me for stealing your gig? And he finally gets up there in the front, and it's all about taking this guy down. And I think for Ollie, I don't think he's fully determined what his gig is yet. But I think he's right when he jumps on the front of there, and he's trying to bring this guy down to stop him from, causing chaos in the city and things like that. When he's trying to do that, I think he couldn't put it to words, I don't think, but that is his gig. That is his thing. And it was funny how in that moment, the action visual took me, and I'm like, you're darn right that's your gig. I really liked that.
Yeah, I noticed from the show, which I love that they added Diggle. And he kind of works with Ollie, and he kind of puts Ollie on track. But even Diggle got kind of, as they started to progress on the show, even Diggle got kind of a little darker in the people they had to fight. So when you bring Felicity in it, it really brightened it up, and it really made them kind of question things that they do. And I like how she calls Ollie on things, and she reminds Diggle of the moral questions that he used to ask Ollie a little bit more before all this stuff happened.
Well, you look at once Diggle's family started getting put directly in harm's way. Mm-hmm. Once, the people he deeply cares about, he kind of went back to more warrior mode and less moral compass mode. And I personally really like seeing that shift in him, seeing him go into protective mode, and then just, once again, the introduction of Felicity, and you're seeing a little bit more of what Diggle's role was coming back in him, and then Ollie's even lightening up a little bit. There's still the intensity and the determination, but there is just that fun on his side, on all their sides, and I think that's something that's definitely needed.
Well, Felicity makes them smile again. Have you noticed that since she's been a part of the group, they actually are smiling when they're together? They even went out to eat. Just that little subtle thing. And I love action. I love to see a lot of action. But just seeing that scene of those, the three of them sitting in the booth at the restaurant and talking, normally about, oh, you like her? Why don't you ask her? Like, you can get in a room full of guys with guns and you can't ask a girl out on a date. And it was just, she called them on that. And she's like, if you want me to do this, then you do that. And I just liked, how that all, worked out. They're starting to bond together, which I think is important for the show, too.
I like that whole, in this, which I thought it actually goes right off of what you're saying. I like the Felicity sequence in this when he knocks out the pilot. Or the Robin Hood, and when he knocks him out, and she's like, "You didn't just knock him out, did you? Because that would leave you without a pilot and all that other stuff." And then she makes that like off the cuff Wii comment about her Wii game. Which did I say play? I meant played. Which to me, it totally fits the intensity of a high energy sequence. People do get tongue in cheek with stuff like that. It's a defense mechanism. It's how you react to those situations. It wasn't over the top. It wasn't slapstick. It didn't take away from it. If anything, it added to the realism we've been talking about throughout this episode. I really liked the realism of this, that it felt like real world. This could be happening right now. And like Darrell, you mentioned before that it's not like he's superhuman. I don't want to see that from Green Arrow. I've always liked that he's a street level character. You can It's yes, there's certain things that are going to be over the top. Him swinging around the outside of the plane, doing all that stuff, sure. But I like Green Arrow the way I like good James Bond when it gets real gritty. Yes, it goes a little bit farther, but when you see this guy doing the workouts that he does, I believe that he should be doing things that I would never in a million years be able to do. So when he swings around a plane, I'm like, well, yeah, look what he does in his gym. So yeah, I get it. And that's, I think, an important balance of you want people to believe that he's doing way more than you could do. But you also don't want him groaning like, oh, that's ridiculous. And I think that's an interesting balance. And this issue, I think, epitomizes what I think works with that. There was never a groaning moment where I'm like, that's too much. It's too over the top. It stretched things out, took it far enough that you're like, want to high five somebody? And you believe that this guy should be able to do things that you would never in a million, like I would be falling.
Yeah. And Ollie forgot how to feel fear for things. Like when he goes into action, it's like he forgets about I could die. It doesn't matter to him anymore. And being on that island, it was he could die at any time, and he kind of that little quirk that we all have to survive. He kind of the fight or flight. It's off of him. It just doesn't work with him anymore. So when Felicity's talking to him, she kind of reminds him, Ollie, I do want you to come back. Alive. Like just be careful of what you're doing because you could, that could kill you. And I think it kind of reminds him why, that there is other things besides the mission that he's on. Like there is an episode where it goes into, which kind of fits when he said, I never used to fear. I forgot how it was to really worry or be in fear of something. And it was more of being in fear of losing people that he cares about than it is for himself.
But I think that's important to the evolution of the character, too. Mm-hmm. Because I think as we've seen him connect with those emotions and feelings in the show, that's where we've seen him evolve. Like you mentioned, smiling more. When he started off in the beginning, he was very alone and disconnected from everybody and everything. There's been a gradual evolution every episode. And that's one of the great things I think that has worked about this show that I think has been unique in the way from superhero programs, I think, in the past, is that I think every single episode has felt like development of the character. Like there's not a one where I felt like he didn't really go anywhere. Mm-hmm. I've watched a gradual, nice-paced evolution of this guy that I think will, I hope will continue for many, many seasons where we continue to see this guy grow and change based on events and things that have happened in his life. I want to see characters pop back in again that he's encountered. I want to see relationships come and go. I want to see friendships grow. I want to see them fall apart. I want to see all these things happen with him because I want to go on the journey with him to see how he deals with these things and what it's like for his world. And I think that's a really important thing that I think the comic has extended is just this sense of connectivity. Because there's times where I'll be done with the episode of the show and be like, what do you mean this is it? I want more. I want to keep watching more. And the comic has been a really great resource where I've never felt like the comic was the show light. Like this issue, reading this one, it really feels like that same kind of, fix that I'm getting from Arrow on TV. And I think that's something that's really, really important when I think we're very used to an immediacy, especially in a day and age where you can watch whole seasons of programs in like a couple week long sitting, if you really want to, with jumping on a TV show that way. I think this comic has offered that sense of, hey, I want more. Well, okay, we're going to give you more. You can read this, and it's put together by writing from the show. We've got great creators on there doing art. We're going to give you that same kind of cinematic experience that you're getting each week in this, and a sense of the continued forward movement that is making you come back each week. And I think that's an interesting balance that I don't think we've always seen in the past from media tie-ins, but I think it's a standard now that I think we as fans are demanding from our media tie-ins, because you see the ones that do very well. And as what Juan was mentioning, G.I. Joe, I think the G.I. Joe comics that have been coming out are great examples of comics that I think have done a great job at tying into a media empire. Because I grew up watching the cartoon. I loved that cartoon. Mm-hmm. And I think the comics, have taken the fact, realizing that there's an audience that has grown up with this, and the comics have matured with the audience in a way where I feel these are the same characters, but I feel like I can still relate to them the way I could when I was younger. And I think that's something we demand now from media tie-ins. They need to have that kind of really cool fix to them.
Well, they matter. I mean, I know I've heard many people say, well, since you have Green Arrow, the comic, why do you need this Arrow book? And I would say this isn't just Green Arrow, running around fighting crime. It kind of delves into characters that you might ask a question about, like the assassin with the white hair. Like people, when you watch it and they're like, well, who is that? They actually did a comic based on her childhood. One of the issues were based on her childhood. So it's for 99 cents if you do it digitally. It's not expensive to just get that extra backstory to kind of understand why she, where she comes from and why she does what she does. And there's a little extra for each of these characters that work with Ollie. So you kind of get more from them.
I like the play on morality. Like we get to see here, an Ollie who we've seen kill. Mm-hmm. We know he will again when the time is right. But then he rescues this guy. And because it was the right thing to do at that time. In that split-second judgment of, I need to, in this situation, because I've got no other choice, take this person out. Or the right thing to do in this case is to bring this guy to justice.
Right.
And that interesting part of, I like that sometimes I don't agree with him. I think he goes too far, but I understand why he sees it that way. And I think that's an interesting thing that's done in the comic. I think it's an interesting thing that's done on the TV show, where he's a character that, like, you're constantly rooting for, but that you can say in certain episodes and in certain experiences, you don't always agree with him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool.
Let me throw something out to you guys, to everybody. Do you want to see the introduction of the metagene type concept in the TV show? So actually bring in superheroes into Ollie's universe?
I thought about that when the one episode that was a little, I thought was a little weak, was the one where they had the drug one. What was his name? Count
Vertigo.
Vertigo.
Well, he went by the Count, and the drug was Vertigo, and it was meant to be the Count Vertigo. I think a take on Count Vertigo from the comics because of his relationship with Ollie.
That, to me, I think that's as close as it's gotten to him fighting somebody that's kind of more of a comic book version than anything, and it felt kind of strange to see him go up against somebody like that. I mean, Deathstroke is still a lot more darker. Like, they really put, Deathstroke and Deadshot, they really are more dipped into a realistic version of them, like mercenaries or assassins. You can kind of understand that because they really do have people that, they do that. But I don't know. It would seem kind of weird to see Ollie go up against somebody with superhuman abilities. I mean, they could do it. They could write it, as long as they do it well, like they've been doing with the show, and they work, they try to work together to kind of work it in, but it just would seem weird the way it's been set up right now.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, maybe down the line, a couple seasons in, they might go there, but with the vibe of the show, the gritty feel to it, like, that's very real, like we've talked. I don't think it would fit in right away. But I think at one point, if this show is successful, they kind of will have to.
I agree with that. I think that there comes a point where the show, like right now, it's definitely not needed. I like how gritty it is. I kind of look at it like Smallville in that sense. And it's funny how I don't link the show to Smallville regularly because I think the pacing is very different. I really like the way this show's laid out. But one of the things that I liked about Smallville was they didn't necessarily leap to certain comic book things that you would expect, like Clark's powers. We didn't have him flying right away. We didn't, there were certain things they didn't need to go to right away, and you never knew if they would. Like, the whole cape and tights thing is a great example of that. There was, a while there where that was never going to be something that would ever happen in that show. But the show went longer than they ever expected, so over time, it kind of had to go towards that route, because there's only so long you can hold him back. You want to, the fans who are watching the show want to see him evolve. I think in Ollie's case, I think it's wide open where this could go in the future, but I really like the focus right now because I think we're getting to know him in a way we don't always get a chance with this character. And I think they've done a really, really good job. I've read a lot of Green Arrow in my life. I really am a huge fan of the character. I think this really, for me, harkens back to what I really loved. The Andy Diggle reference to that year one with Jock, I think is dead on. But it also harkens back to me a lot of what I loved about the work of Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, but also Mike Grell. I think the early, Mike Grell with the Longbow Hunters and stuff like that in theme, I think really fits a lot of the tone of this show. I feel like I'm watching Oliver Queen. I think that's something that's really, really interesting when you're bringing this guy to a screen and you've got to balance out what kind of trick arrows you use because you want to throw that in there as a nod to the fans, but you don't want anyone groaning. The use of tech as opposed to silliness, I think has been a really great thing because when they were originally brought trick arrows into the comics, it worked. And yeah, it was a little silly, but there was boxing glove arrows and all that stuff when it was originally introduced was cool. Nowadays, our technology has moved so far forward that we don't want to see him firing boxing gloves. We want to see him stealth tech. Where he's listening in on conversations, leaving messages, blowing things up, in ways that feel realistic and gritty and still make sense, yet enhance him. Keep us in this feeling that he doesn't need the tech to be a great archer. Because he's a great archer, he's able to put that tech places that most other people couldn't in a million years.
With Felicity, I can see them kind of doing this thing where Felicity it bothers her still that he kills, even though he's killing, bad guys. So I could see her, they already established how smart she is. She worked with their developments in different weapons and stuff like that. She's done all types of things. So I could see her saying, what if I built you certain arrow tips that instead of you kill, it zaps them and it knocks them out. And
you could definitely see that coming because Sean mentioned the James Bond, type of character, and it's I had a thought about this arrow that made me remember something I heard about James Bond, where this current Bond doesn't have the tons of weird gadgets because we've reached a point of technology where we can do cooler stuff but still make it feel real, And same thing with arrow, you don't need a boxing glove arrow, but you can easily have an arrow that it can hit you in the ankle, but electrocute you and knock you down with one shot. And it's going back to that same thing they're always saying, where you can make the same effect without having a cheesy visual.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view the whole thing too. You can get that kind of interesting effect. I think Felicity offers an interesting person to maybe up his game on technology and how it's being used, which I think. Obviously, Ollie's comfortable with it, but I like this kind of sense that he's been away for 5 years. So certain things have moved on in his time, and he needs certain people to bring him up to date. And I think I've always liked the Team Arrow concept. I think it's something that works in the comics with the character when you've got the right people backing him and being team members with him. You don't want to lose the fact that this is your lead fella. And you don't want to diminish him by having a team. You want to enhance him by having a team. And I think the show has captured that. This issue with Felicity, and you see the relationship with the two of them throughout this. I love when she's pulling out the iPad, kind of going through information and trying to help him through everything. Sky Captain never had this many controls. That was stuff, and I actually have some questions about that sequence that I want to ask you on. That type of relationship with her and him, he's still the one in the intense situation. He's still the one left to handle it, land the plane, make this all work out on some level, or land the plane, survive the plane, it's better, and survive it the right way. Those are the things that I really enjoy about this series and what's going on in the comic, is those kind of high, intense moments where the team makes sense to me and it works and it doesn't diminish. With the iPad, I'm a big fan of comics. It's not just in that sequence. Throughout this issue, there's great use of light sourcing. There's great use of, Darrell mentioned the wind effects and things like that. When you as a creator, you get a hold of the pencils and you've got to take a look at a sequence of events and knowing that it's going to go to a colorist afterwards. How do you handle things as an inker in the process when it comes to light sourcing? Because I'm a big fan of that. It seems like such a tiny little thing, but it's really not. That adds to that realism we've all been talking about, and it's a fine detail that when you see the way, this iPad works when she's looking at it, the instrument panel, everything from the smoke motion, that page is just a great example of, I think, visual effects. Special effects that we normally see, smoking on the television screen, light reflecting off of her body and stuff like that. How does that work on the inking end when you get that piece? How do you handle that?
On the panels that, for example, you have her looking at the iPad, and then where she's staring in front of all the monitors, and Arrow is behind her. That's all that was all the colorist doing. He did a really great job with that. But for example, when the firemen are putting out the plane and through all the wreckage, that's when I had to go in and just follow the guide that the penciler gave me of there's fire here, there's debris there, and just go in and detail everything as best I could. And like you said, we've all seen these images on the news and all that, so I just try to do my best to give it the same feel that I had when I saw those images for real and try to put them down with ink. Yeah, sometimes, for example, the scene where he's first suiting up and all that, in the first sequences, the lighting was very important. So the pencils were very specific of it, but I got to do a little bit more subtle shadows where maybe there was just a solid black shadow and things like that. You have to keep in mind how you fade out of black, so that you create the lighting effect instead of just having harsh black and white, basically.
So do you have to think ahead, of what needs to be in place for the coloring process to make sure you're not you're setting up a situation but not getting in the way of a situation? If I'm making sense there.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah, sometimes things I look at it and I could spend an hour maybe detailing something, but I'm it would literally take the colorist 2 seconds to do this, so I'll just leave it up to him for sure.
There was nothing jarring at all about this issue for me. There was not a spot where I stopped. I kept moving. I was taken through a journey that there wasn't a panel that made me go, whoa, which is critical, I think, when you're trying to mimic a show that has that kind of feel and sense.
It was the first time working with this specific team, so I think I'm really glad you liked it, and I think you'll notice things meshing a little bit even more on the next issue from us. So it's really good that it came across that well.
I like that with a creative team. I like seeing people reoccur on titles because I like to see the growth. I really enjoyed this issue. So, I want to see what you guys do together next. And I think that's really, for fans, I think that's where we start connecting with creators. It's when we get to kind of see, like you said, that this is the next stage. This is where we're going to go next. And you're going to see that, now that we've worked together, we've kind of seen what each other can do. So I have a better sense of, what the colors are going to look like, what the pencil is going to send me. So I know what my role is in this, and the scripts and everything. I think that's really, really great because it is something I notice and appreciate. That's the fine details that I notice. It's when I see something, that stepped up a peg from the last issue. And especially when I've already really been enjoying it, it's fun to see that, wow, you can actually take me further. And that's kind of a cool part of the whole thing. So I'm excited for issue 24.
Thanks. Yeah, especially as a reader myself, I always appreciate seeing a team just stay on as long as they can on a project because I like to get used to the voice of the team on a specific book. So being on the creator end of that, it's a great feeling.
Hey, Juan, how did you get into doing this for a living? Because you're obviously a comic book fan. So it's, a lot of us, think, oh, that'd be great to be a creator. You actually have the talent to do that.
Thanks. Yeah. Since I was a kid, I've always liked art. I always loved drawing. And when I was a little kid, my dad would do these awesome drawings for me when I was 5 or 6, and I would just stare at him drawing, and was always just fascinated by it. And as I became a teenager, I discovered comics, and I was like, oh wait, you mean there's because I grew up during the 90s, so there was the X-Men cartoons, the Spider-Man cartoons, and all that. It was the golden age for a kid, Saturday morning at that time with the geek properties. So I found this comic shop, and I'm like, wait, you mean I could read like 30 years of Spider-Man? So that was awesome. And I started getting into comics, and I would always just draw, on my school books and all that during recess or whatever. And then at my comic shop once, I met a professional comic artist that lived here in town, and I'm in Mexico. So it was kind of mind-blowing because I always read comics and just assumed the New York bullpen was still in place, So it never even occurred to me, oh, this is something I could do. Then after I met him and got a chance to talk to him, like it just blew my mind, and I got really serious about my art. And during high school, I focused a lot on my art class and all that, and then I actually studied fine arts. So even though I'm an inker, I can draw, and I do a lot of paintings and stuff like that. But to be honest, I went into inking because there's no way I could draw a 22-page book in a month. Like, I could probably do 2 pages in a month if I had to draw them. So inking just felt like the best way to go if I wanted to do this professionally.
Well, I tell you, I'll be honest, I've got no artistic skills. So for me, seeing, and this is, again, something through the podcast that I've really learned to appreciate, there is definitely a skill set. There is a definite artistic skill set to be an inker. Just like there's a skill set to be the colorist and the penciler. It's something that over time I've actually really learned to understand and appreciate more. So, dude, it's amazing what you're doing on this stuff. So there's definitely artistic skills here, man.
Thanks. And yeah, my background in studying other forms of art has definitely helped in my inking, because sometimes I'll get a page for like a project and they'll be like, can you have this ready in 3 weeks? And I'll be fine. Oh, by the way, the pencils aren't done. Can you work from layouts? Kind of thing. So like if I didn't have those other skills, I would be kind of like... well, this is a podcast that doesn't use language, so can I say screwed?
Sure.
I'd be screwed if I couldn't, do it, because I would just have to pass on the gig. But like having those other skill sets really helps. And also like the more I practice other stuff, it influences and informs my inking more, because I can kind of understand the penciler a little bit better. So that's something I really like to focus on. Like I'm not just basically covering lines with black ink. I'm finishing the drawing.
If we can borrow a statement from Kevin Smith movies, you're not just a tracer.
Oh, it's really funny you mentioned that, because I had that same experience at a con. And,
outstanding.
Yeah, someone approached me, but the thing is, this person was also an inker who wanted to break into the business. And the way he approached me about it, he was really bitter about it, and he threw the Kevin Smith line at me, thinking that was going to be like a big burn to other artists that were there with me. But it was just like, you're not the only one here who's seen that Kevin Smith movie. And he just went red and walked away.
Guys, if we could, and we don't have to abandon completely talking about Arrow, but I want to make sure we do talk about Batwing, because I think it's really interesting, because we're really dealing with 2 different styles when we're looking at what's going on in Batwing. And I'd love to talk to you about the experience of working on a book where you're one of the inkers on there and there's other inkers. Like, how does that process work? Because I really enjoyed this issue. You were on Batwing number 16, and I think Batwing is just an amazingly cool character. He's one of the ones out of the New 52 that he was created in Batman Inc., but it was one of that series was announced. He was one of those characters that they were setting it in Africa, and it was kind of, to me, it's a location that DC hasn't really explored in detail. So it gave us kind of a new setting and a location, but also a character whose motivations would be driven by the location he was at, which I think has, especially in the issue you were working on, issue 16, this is a pretty pivotal issue in like establishing where his status quo is going right now, because corruption really became a big part of this issue. But I guess jumping back a little bit to where my original question was going with this, when you're working on this issue, how does it work as an inker when you're working with, because I thought the flow you all did on this was really great. It's clear when I get to certain pages that there's slight differences as you go through, but I thought the theme and tone and the presentation of the issue, it gelled really, really well. how is that for you as an inker when, like, do you see any of the other ink work? Or is it, how do you make that happen? Because you guys did a really good job of keeping me moving throughout this. Very similar to what I said about Arrow, there was nothing at all jarring in this. It was a very important issue of Batwing for me because of the corruption focus on the whole thing. I think I was really involved in what was going on in this one because his status quo was really established here. And how does that work for you when you're working with multiple inkers?
Yeah, when I came on the project, that was actually my first DC project. I was really happy to work on it. And the way it worked, the book was running a little bit late, so they had to bring on some more inkers to get it done on time. And they showed us all. We had like this shared folder basically on a server, so we could all be looking at each other's work. But mainly, I looked at a lot of the stuff that Penciler had himself on, and tried to do a style that would be similar to how he would finish it. And so that was, I thought, the best approach I could take to it, so that it wouldn't be jarring and all that. And like I was speaking about how Victor's pencils were ultra clean and just basically, I just had to like put a little shine on top of it. Here with Alan Jefferson, who's also a great penciler, his stuff is very loose, so it gives you a lot of opportunity to put in a lot, which is great. Some inkers are kind of there's always a 50-50 discussion among inkers. Like, some inkers hate it and love it. I'm one of those that love it, getting looser pencils. And so I got a chance to like play around with a lot of textures, break shadows different ways, add a little bit more detail where I thought it was needed and stuff like that. And and I was noticing as all the other inkers were uploading their pages, they were doing a very similar approach. So I'm really glad it worked out at the end. Then it wasn't like a jarring thing where you would turn a page and it would look like a completely different artist.
Now, you mentioned before we were chatting that you are a Batman fan. What is it like to have your first DC like big work like this, to be on a Batman-related title? Something you said in the Bat universe like Batwing, because I would imagine, because this is a really cool issue too. What was it like working on this title as a fan?
Oh, it was great because, like you mentioned, he was introduced in Batman Inc., and I've been a gigantic fan of the Morrison run on Batman that's been going on for years and years. So as soon as I heard Batwing, I was really excited. And those panels where, he's in full armor and fighting, and just getting the chance to ink the Bat logo on his chest, that was really surreal. It was a very awesome experience.
Yeah, it was exciting just to see a friend of yours with his name on one of the comic books that you read. I mean, he's worked on Boom and IDW, and it's great to see his name there. But it's just something special about seeing it in a DC logo book.
Yeah, even as an artist, this may sound ridiculously dumb maybe, but it's true. When you get those art boards and they have the DC logo on the corner, there's something just that makes me really geek out when I see that.
You do a little happy dance, like, yay!
Yep.
Okay, maybe I would.
No, I totally did. In fact, when I got my first box, I immediately showed a photo to a bunch of the guys, because DC's just been extremely pleasant to work with. They send me a box filled with paperwork, obviously, as an employee, and this giant stack of DC paper, and every single comic book and trade that had come out that week.
Lovely.
And I was like, oh, this is so awesome.
It must be nice to get packages from... That's got to be, as a creator, kind of cool in general when you're able to get a hold of comic work that way. Because, the cool part is you put in so much time of your time into delivering this, and you touch, has that hit you? How many people your work touches when you're, you've mentioned G.I. Joe, you've mentioned, there's work you've done at Boom, the Arrow, this book. You've touched a lot of different people with projects you've been involved in. Has that hit you yet? How many people have, seen your work or seen things that you've been involved in and enjoyed it?
I don't really think about it a lot, but when I do notice it is when I do, original art sales. And then all of a sudden, I have to send out a bunch of packages. And then I look at the list, and I'm like, okay, I have to send this piece to London, and this piece to Australia, and this one to New York, San Francisco, and this one to LA. And then I'm like, there's pieces of me all over, and that's when it hits me. But when working on the comics itself, I don't know, it's like all comic creators, we do this locked in a cave in our house, basically. So it's kind of really surreal to think about how many people actually get to see your work and read your name on a piece of paper,
Well, because the beauty of that is I would imagine, like, you're going to have overlap with some readers who read Batwing and Arrow, but both books would have their own audiences that are also independent of each other. So, then you throw in the G.I. Joe audience and you keep going on. I think it's really cool because you've really touched a lot of, I'm sure, overlap audiences that are familiar with your work through, they read everything that you've touched on. But then you've got audiences that are just hitting you for the first time when you did Batwing, or just hitting you for the first time on Arrow because they're a fan of the show or something like that. And I just think that's a neat aspect of being able to get the opportunity to work on a variety of different projects, is just how like the way your creativity is, because for me, like when I read that issue of Arrow, I honestly was having a horrible week, and it was one of those things where after reading that issue, I was like, it just pumped me up, got me motivated again. There was things I needed to get done for work, and that's something that comics and creators like you do for me. That you're right, I don't think you get an opportunity. You don't get to see that because you're not hanging in my house. And if you are, I'm calling the police. But it's like, but no, I mean, it's really, taking the joking out of it and being serious about it. That's something that your work does that you don't have the connection with, but it's greatly appreciated by us as fans. It's why you're getting original art sales and things like that from all over, because there's these people that are connecting with cool things that you've been a part of. And I think that's really neat that you get a chance to see some of that through the original artwork.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Also, like I haven't done a lot of cons. Like I said, I'm not in the U.S. I'm in Mexico, so we only have a couple of cons. But it's always really kind of surreal when someone approaches you and like they actually know who you are. I'm like, because sometimes you work in a bubble and you forget that people actually read this stuff. So it's really exciting.
Kind of a technical sort of question to give, because we have, when you're dealing like with the different ethnicities of characters, because you go from Arrow where you're dealing predominantly Caucasian, you've got then over to Batwing where they're from Africa, so they're going to have the darker skin complexions and just the different kind of a physical layout. Is that something when you're going through these type of projects that you're noticing, or is there different things you have to do, or different things you have to be conscious of when you're actually in the creative process?
Yeah, sometimes, like on these two projects, I was lucky enough to be working with great pencilers that I just basically have to keep track of the characters just so that I don't screw it up, basically. But on some other books I've done in the past, I've had it where it's like, oh, yeah, this character should not have these features in this panel or that panel, and I go in and fix it. But yeah, it's definitely something that comes up every once in a while.
Emotion was a heavy part of this book. From the various emotions that Batwing himself was going throughout the entire issue, to the emotions of the villains of the piece. Marksbury with his entitlement in the beginning, straight on through to the dad. And the dad was just a flurry of emotions, from cockiness to rage. I just really loved that throughout this story, I felt like you got a little bit of everything in this one. And that was something that I really enjoyed about this piece, was just how many different places it went. Because it was really necessary in this one to establish, for Batwing especially, Gotham City for Batman has always been this sense of, how is Batman ever going to overcome everything that's going on there? In this issue, they did a great job of establishing that for Batwing, but I love how different it looks than Gotham. I felt like the same sense of, how can he ever overcome this completely? And I love that he felt like that his supporting cast feels like that. But it looks differently for each person, which led to a flurry of different emotions that you guys had to convey on these pages, which I would imagine was pretty difficult to kind of keep track of, okay, what's this person feeling now? And how do I make sure not to lose that in this piece? Did you run into that a lot when you were going through, that you had to kind of think back to where we're at in the book and what's going on with the characters?
Not so much on this issue, because like I said, Alan Jefferson did a great job on it, but I always like to double check the script as I'm inking panel by panel. But like on another issue of something else I did for DC, there was this specific scene where, sometimes pencilers are rushed and all that, so they don't really get to put as much time on a page as they would like to. And there was a facial expression that I wasn't really sure what was going on, so I just had to double check the script and like do my best to help the penciler like translate that into the final piece. And but thankfully on this specific issue, I just had to stay out of the penciler's way in those panels, because he does very great facial expressions, especially like the fear when the gunmen are coming at a couple of characters in a scene that I got to ink. And I just try to help complement it as much as I can, but kind of stay out of the way. Just basically not mess with what they did when they did a good job.
The gunman sequences you mentioned in general throughout this issue, I think were really, really important, because you had to have this sense of, because there was times when he was in suit, there was times when he was out of suit, there's times where the suit was present on its own, kind of as its own entity, and I loved how there was a really cool flow in this issue of in and out of costume sequences, because I'm a fan of that in comics. As growing up as a kid, you kind of were exposed to the hero in the costume all the time, and it was almost secondary a lot of times to see the character outside of it. I loved in this issue that we got to see him in both instances, and how being in one role or the other affected how he was reacting to his supporting cast, and which included the gunmen, which I thought was, because the gunmen were sometimes buddies, buddies is a very loose term. They were colleagues, I should say. That's probably a better way to put it, because I think buddy, for a lot of people in this one, is a very strong term for anybody. I really liked that about this issue, was this sense of you don't know who to trust. And that, to me, made me respect this guy even more throughout the issue, that he kept going. Because when do you throw in the towel? At what point in time do you go, this is hopeless, nobody appreciates me, what is my motivation to keep doing this? And I felt like throughout this issue, I was so much more impressed with him as a character, which I think is really important to establish all the way through. And it comes from those intense scenes where there's danger, and you wonder why he's keeping going and all that.
No, yeah, Fabian did an amazing job with this issue. When I first got the script and read it through, I was really, really... I sometimes, when I'm reading scripts, I'm just kind of reading them through to get a sense of what I'm doing. But when I was reading this one, it was kind of like when you're reading the issue for the first time. I just kept turning the page, and it was really exciting to see what was going to happen next.
Darrell?
He's pushed his back to the wall, and he has a stance against killing, even though that's what he was forced to kill at such a young age, and he has to deal with that. It would be easier for him to just kill these guys, but he has a code, and that tragedy in his life is made him, like Batman, say that I would never, take a life. Especially, he actually has blood on his hands, so he really, it's really a thing with him not to kill, and to be in a position where you have no one to help you, and everybody's gunning for you. I mean, you feel really bad for David.
I like that Matu doesn't always agree with him on his stance. He tries to understand, he tries to support, and tries to appreciate that, but sometimes he's like, I understand your stance not to kill, but in certain situations, this stance is going to get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I love that I see both sides of the argument. I think that makes this book very interesting and unique. It's not a rehash of the Bruce and Alfred relationship. We feel the need for the two of them to be together. You feel what they both bring to each other's table. But I really like that their relationship, their different philosophies, the butting heads that happen sometimes, is something that feels very natural and cool, and I really like that about it, because it is different and unique.
Yeah, he's scared for David.
And himself.
Yeah.
And I like that part too. I like sometimes that he's, a little worried about how this is going to affect him, which I think is great.
Yeah.
This is one of the characters that part of me, I always love the code of the Bat. I love the fact that they don't kill and that it's part of it, but he is one of the characters that he's one of the members of the Bat family. If he were to break the code of the Bat, I wouldn't have an issue with it. Just because he is so far, his back is so far against the wall. He has the most extreme situation out of all the Bat family for sure. Exactly. And Gotham's a tough city to live in, but Gotham is nothing by comparison to this town and to this region and just everything that he's up against. The fact that he holds true to the code of the Bat really always impresses me, because I would be okay with him killing.
Wow. And the funny part is, like, I'm saying wow in that I see your point. I don't know. I like that he's troubled by it and that it isn't something he wants to do and that it bothers him. I could see what you're going with, too, that there'd be reasons where I'd be like, okay, I get why he's doing it here. But it's funny how he's kind of an in-between of, we were talking about Arrow earlier, the Ollie on the Arrow TV show and Bruce Wayne in comics. It's funny how I kind of see him stuck between a rock and a hard place between those two ideologies, where he's been on Ollie's end, arguably more extreme with what he's gone through, and he's trying to come back to the Bruce end of it, or maybe go to the Bruce end of it when he's never been there before. I can see how hard it is for him, especially when your colleagues are you've got the Detective Bemba, you've got Kia, and the Captain, and even that wondering, is the Captain on my side or not? Is he going to back my play or not? In this world, I can understand why that would be an issue. It makes a far more compelling look at what he can or can't do, or should not be able to do.
And and innocent lives are being taken by these guys. Like every death that they commit that you could have prevented. It's the same thing with Batman. I go back and forth on that too. Every death, like the Joker, for example, has taken when you had the Joker in your hands and you could have ended him and you didn't, and he got away and he's killed. Like, how do you deal with that too?
Yeah, it becomes an interesting dilemma, because my feeling is, and it's very similar where comics make this argument, once you begin, where do you stop? And I think it's an interesting conundrum. And I think this is a book, it's something I've always liked in the Batman universe. And I think this is a book that really revisits a lot of those themes in a unique way I always loved the character of Azrael because of that kind of duality and that kind of issue with him too. And I think because of the location and how this character's grounded so much differently, he kind of fits that gap for me without having an Azrael book of the type of character that you really see a very dark world. I love how unique that he feels because of the dark world that he's in. It's compelling. I mean, I know I've said it repeatedly on this, but I really do find this book very interesting and compelling. And it's a character that I love when Morrison creates these characters and somebody has the great idea to take them beyond and go someplace with them beyond. And I think Batwing is a character who I think has evolved. In this issue in particular, really did stand out for me because of its high focus on the corruption. I really felt for him emotionally in this issue and felt like this sense of, I felt like as a fan, how is he going to overcome this? And in comics where we usually expect our heroes to do that, that's kind of something in our head that's going to happen. For me to be taken to that place where I'm like, can he do this? Can anybody do this? I think that's really, really cool, especially this many issues into the series.
Yeah, this is a series that I'm growing, more and more in touch with, more and more a part of, and it's just something that this is, when the character was first introduced, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that can make it interesting. That's kind of neat, and they announced the monthly series, like, oh yeah, that should be kind of, that'll definitely be a neat spin, a cool, story. I was looking forward to that. But as the series gone on, he went from being Batwing to being David. And And I started thinking of him as the person who has to put on this costume, who has to deal with these, tough decisions, and just this, this terrible, hard life that he's got to deal with as this hero, as this good cop in a corrupt system, as just this person who has this past that does haunt him that he's trying to, work through and show that there is the true hero in him. You see that in this guy. This is your classic great dun-da-da kind of hero moments in this guy in this tough world. And it's as this series has gone on, he's become David. He's become my friend. He's become this guy that I'm like, yeah, this is a cool guy.
Yeah. And it's not the kid, like, even if David killed, if he had to take a bad guy's life, same thing with Bruce Wayne. Love Batman, love Bruce Wayne. If he had to kill the Joker, I don't think that would make him less of a hero to me, because the thing that I always loved growing up and reading about the character that made me love him so much was that he would take the bullet for a stranger. Mm-hmm. He would use the last ounce of his strength to make sure that, to try to save somebody every night. It doesn't matter if he got shot or if even when he was crippled, he still wanted to go out there and fight. Like, that's what makes him a hero for me. Like, I do it so that you don't have to do it. I love that scene in Nolan's movies when he says, you don't have to apologize for me. You don't have to. It's my job to take care of these things for you and stuff that you can't do. So David, I got that Batman Begins feeling from David because he has no support. Just like when, before with Gotham, when Batman was first in Gotham and he had no support. He just had maybe one or two allies. So I kind of feel that way for David. Like, if he had to do it, I don't think that would prevent him from being a hero, because I know he would only do it if it was to save somebody else's life.
In Dark Knight Returns, when Batman spoilers, when Batman killed the Joker, mm-hmm. I had zero issue with it.
Me too.
I thought that it fit the story. I thought we'd hit that place, and arguably that was also way later after Bruce had retired and come back, and you'd kind of all of the stories that we had read had happened with the character, but I didn't. Like, afterwards, I didn't have this feeling like it was out of character for Batman or it was wrong for the character. I felt like in the situation, it just had to happen. It's where their tragic relationship had gone. And for the longest time, I viewed that as the future of Batman. I think since, time's gone on, we've seen other possible alternative futures for the character, but that was something that stood out for me as never being something that I had an issue with. Now, that doesn't mean that I want to see him go on a rampage and, Penguin's next, then the Riddler. Then right. And I think that's got to be, if that ever happens for the character, that's got to be the distinction.
Because I don't think he would. Like, police, people in the armed forces, they have to take lives, and they don't become, they don't all turn into raving, crazy people that kill. They have morals. They have families. They have to do things that they have to do, and they do have to deal with the consequences. Like, I would want to see Batman deal with the aftermath of taking a life. I would want to see him deal with that, but I don't want to see him go, well, then I'll just have to kill everyone else who gets in my way, prevents me from helping people. I don't think he would do that.
Juan, when you get on projects at the last minute like that, where you're being called in because the book's running late, you want to make sure that it gets on time and all that stuff, does that for you as an inker put a lot of pressure on you? And if so, how do you deal with that? Or how do you deal with that even if it doesn't? Like, how do you approach a project like that when it's up to me to make sure, and a team of people like you worked with in this case, to make sure that this book gets delivered on time because readers are expecting it?
Yeah, usually when I get a really strict deadline like that, I look at my options. Sometimes it's just get it done as fast as humanly possible, and quality has to drop a little bit just because it's inevitable. But what I was able to do with this project, since the work was split among a team of inkers, is instead of rushing through the pages, I just basically put in more hours every day So I basically worked from 5 a.m. till midnight for an entire week so that I could get it done on time, but also not have to rush through it. And I seem to find myself in that situation a lot of times recently. But I think that's just the best way to do it for me.
Jim mentioned before that the character has become David to him. I got to be honest with you. I've always enjoyed Batwing as a series. I hadn't hit that point that Jim's talking about until right here. Fabian Nicieza, when he came on board, and then when you guys started doing this, and I mentioned the corruption element of this. I think for this one, and I don't know why it took me this long to view him as not Batwing, but the guy. And Jim's point's really strong here. Once I've started viewing him as David, my feelings of attachment to him are through the roof now. And this issue, and it's something that's a testament to all of you that worked on it, this issue was really pivotal for me. Because seeing how this juggling act, this insane juggling act that he was doing in this issue, in and out of costume, how he's really getting enemies for himself from all fronts. He doesn't have the Bruce Wayne identity to go to. The David identity is in just as much danger as Batwing is. And to keep people from knowing as much as you can that he's Batwing is becoming harder and harder for this guy. There are people discovering it that are close to him, and he's got to rely on, are they going to tell, are they not going to tell? How do they feel about me now that they know? And Kia, in particular, is somebody, as this series is going on, how much does she know, and how much is she going to reveal, and things like that. It's funny to look at that kind of duality in such a different way. I've really grown to love this guy as a character. It's been an interesting journey to get to this point, but this was one of the pivotal issues for me that started to make me see him as David because of the fact that it was an all-front problem that he was dealing with. It was in and out of the costume. Everything was blending together, but it was more than one thing that was blending together in this because of the fact that this led to the corruption intercepting with the person that Batwing was hunting down, to the fact that his captain had certain information, all of these things, and his partner, his friend, is also in this situation. It just really was like, it seemed like for him, it never would end. When does he breathe? And I really loved that intensity of this. It made me respect David in a way, I think, that made him feel really unique. And that's really important to me with a character that's newer, and where you're trying to create an extended mythos for him. I want to see this guy do more moving forward. I want to know more about where David's journey is going to take him. And this was a really great issue that you guys all put together on that, especially with what you had to do, because it never took me out of any of that. And that's really a cool testament to the team of people that worked on this one, because that's hard to pull off when you've got this many people working on a book, and it really came out well.
Thanks. Yeah, that was really my focus, especially since it was my first comics DC Comics job, because I had done other stuff for DC, like trading cards and stuff for the video games. But I didn't want the time constraints to affect the quality of it like it normally would. So I'm really glad you think it paid off.
Now, with the type of character that you're working on, because I look at the characters, I see some that are more in the shadows, like Batman. You got some that are the bright lights, like Superman. Is there a character archetype or a character style that you're like, man, that would be a really fun one to work on?
Yeah, definitely characters like Batman who are always in the shadows and stuff like that. For example, I mentioned I do a lot of G.I. Joe work, so when I get to do Snake Eyes, he's my favorite character of that universe of characters to work on. So definitely more of a fan of that, because you get to play with shadows and textures and different textures and effects. But where it's more of a character that's bright and there in the light, you have to be a lot more careful of your details in every single line you choose to throw. That's definitely why I like darker characters more.
Cool.
I always loved Snake Eyes. And I remember the classic Silent issue of Snake Eyes back in Marvel because Snake Eyes was the main character in the issue, and he was, I don't know, how many of you guys read, do you guys know the issue I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about that issue was absolutely no dialogue at all. Full of great story throughout it really was an example of art needing to bring to life everything that you would normally get from dialogue. And it worked so well, even to the point where I remember this one cool sequence where Snake Eyes' arms went around Scarlet, catching the sword with his hands. I just thought it was, to me, I remember at the time, that was like it's up there with Miller's Wolverine miniseries, as far as just moments where I'm like, wow, this really defines a character. And I've been a Snake Eyes fan since then. I think the modern comics have really captured that cool aspect. It's that Snake Eyes that I'm reading today. And I think that's one of the cool things about the character is that he's remained that guy that I remember from that silent issue of the series. Because I read that comic all the way through when it was out. But I remember that issue, as many people who are G.I. Joe fans remember, when that issue came out, it was like, oh, can't we just have every issue silent Snake Eyes? Because it was really great. And I think that has been captured today in the comics with that character. I really I'm a big fan of Snake Eyes in general as well. So I think it's funny how you're throwing out characters that you've worked on or would like to work on in comics. Batman, being another example. I'm like, I'm totally getting why I'm gelling with your art tastes when you develop storytelling, because you very much like the same kind of material that I do. So I think that's why both of these issues really gelled heavily with me, because we have very similar sensibilities in what we like.
Just a little worried for what's to come, looking at solicitations for when the new team takes over of Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, and they're talking about a new person who will bear the mantle of Batwing. I'm a little worried for David.
I am too, because I love the character. So it's going to be interesting what kind of journey they take me on, and what happens to him if he's not going to be that guy.
I was hoping that it was going to be this. It was going to still be David. Just he's going to get a new secret identity or something to that mindset. Because for me, as I said, he is Batwing. So it's for them to change this around. I'm going to be kind of, oh, wait, hold on.
Juan, one of the things I want to make sure on this episode that I don't forget to do is if people want to find out information about your work and want to follow what you're doing next and things like that, where can they go to find information about you?
I'm on Twitter as Juan Castro Inker, all one word. You can find me as Juan Castro Inker on DeviantArt.com. And for original art sales and all that, the interiorpages.com. I do a sale once a year, and so I have all the Batwing art, Arrow pages, stuff from G.I. Joe, Transformers, Micronauts, basically everything I've worked on recently, what I still have left. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, that would be awesome.
And those will all be linked in the show notes, which will then, of course, obviously be in the podcast episode and on the website for anybody listening on this. And if you didn't write it down, just make sure to click on the website and go ahead and get direct links right to all of that from our show.
Oh, and if people are on Instagram, they can follow me at Juan Castro Inker on Instagram, and I post desk shots of what I'm working on pretty much 2 or 3 times a day. So if you'd like to see some of the process, I post a lot of process work in there. A lot of step-by-step.
Well, that's cool. I actually I've got to start following that, because that's become something because I'm not an artist, I've really come to enjoy just how much goes into what happens every 30 days in these books that I read. I'm amazed at what you guys are able to accomplish, which is a testament to you, to every creative person who's involved on an issue. I don't know how you guys do what you do in the time constraints that you do. I think it's just amazing. It just keeps me coming back for more. So it's really great.
Thanks. I don't know either how we get it done in time.
Juan, is there anything else about... I know we've kind of covered a lot of your job and what you do. Is there anything else about inking or the inking process or anything that you think that you want people to know, or something you want to say about it that maybe we didn't get to?
I think we were very technical with stuff like that, but as far as stuff that I'm working on, I'll also be doing issue 6 of Team 7 for DC, and that was a lot of fun to work on too, especially the set of pages that I got to do. It's a big reveal and some really awesome pages where I got to do a bunch of special effects and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. I could talk for like 3 hours about the process, but I think we covered most of the highlights.
Juan, I want to thank you for joining us on the show. Darrell, I want to also throw out to you, let people know about your podcast, where they can find out information about you. I know we've had you on the show a number of times, but I want to make sure that anybody who maybe this is their first episode.
Oh, yeah. You if you go to the Taylor Network of Podcasts.com, you can check out, all the podcasts that we do. Me and Juan, we do No Apologies together with a group of the other guys, Christopher Kazicki, Chris Campbell, Raphael Saz, who's called in many times, and Tom King, who is also doing who's a writer now on the anthology for Vertigo, Time Warp. We just talk comics. We all talk about some issues with comics, and we all have our varied opinions, and sometimes we get a little crazy. Usually, but we have a good time. We love comics, and that's what we do. And with Comic Book Roadshow, we interview a lot of people. We've interviewed a host of people for the show who are involved in comics, from anyone from Jimmy Palmiotti to Ken Christensen, who's doing an Image book called Todd the Ugliest Kid on Earth, to Matt Wagner from Mage and Grendel. We've talked to Colin Bunn with the Six Gun, and a bunch of other people that we've talked to. You can check out Nothing's On with me and Donnie Salvo and Jim Dietz, and we talk a lot of TV and some movies, and we have a good time doing that. And with JK's Happy Hour, it's me and JK Woodward, the artist who's worked on Fallen Angel with Peter David, and he worked on the Doctor Who and Star Trek, The Next Generation crossover, and we get to talk to a lot of other writers about the process and talk about comics that we're reading and stuff like that. And you can also hear me on DC Noise with me and Keith Knudsen and Mike Myers, and we talk DC Comics in a different way than Raging Bullets, a very different way. But we still... A lot
more expletives.
Some of that, yes. But it's the same premise. It's a group of friends, and we sit around and we talk comics, and because we love it, and we love, talking to each other, and we have a good time. I also started doing a Star Trek podcast called Dork Trek, which they brought me on with Bob France, brought me on as one of the hosts, and we review Star Trek episodes in a fun way. So I think I named everything. I hope I didn't forget anything. You can see all that stuff on the website. All the links are available. You can check it out. You can join us on we have a Facebook group too, Taylor Network of Podcasts, and we talk about a whole bunch of stuff, from comics to movies to TV, for everything. We go down the down the rabbit hole and go into any conversation that comes in our minds and stuff. So that's about it. And thank you for having us on, Sean and Jim. We love the show, and you've always been supportive to us and to a bunch of other podcasts. You've always been that way, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, we definitely. I would love to follow up again, especially Juan with your upcoming work at DC and stuff like that. It'd be great to catch up again and check and see how your time at DC is progressing and what new projects are coming your way. So I definitely love to do something like this again. And Darrell, as always, it's great to chat with you. So thank you both for coming on. I wanted to mention one thing about Darrell's website from a personal standpoint. I find that I grade papers a lot in front of my computer because all of our report cards, and one of the changes is that they're online. So I'll have my report cards open in one window. I'll go to your website, and one of the cool things I really love is you've grouped all of your podcasts so you can just click on, the particular podcast show and you can listen right from the site. I'm a big fan of subscribing to podcasts through iTunes and stuff like that, but I'm loving more and more going to the website and being able to listen when, like, I'm in front of my computer. I'm like, okay, I want to listen to something right now. I don't want to have to hook up my iPod or open up iTunes, get it right from the website. And that works really well as an option as far as for listening to podcast episodes, because it just gives me a great opportunity to just kind of throw on a show and start grading. And because a lot of times I'll be sitting in front of the computer for a good couple hours doing that. So I wanted to shout that out as another option for people who want to start dabbling in your podcasts. It's a great way to start doing a sampling of what's going on your website. So it's really, really cool. So I wanted to mention for people to go ahead and check that out as well.
Well, thank you. I think thanks a lot, man, because you have always been, a positive force in comics. Like when we all complain about this or that or this book or that book, you have always been that positive force that goes, hey, I'm reading this. I like this. I don't care if it's DC. I don't care if it's Marvel. I don't care if it's Image, IDW, whatever it is. If you're liking it, you can criticize the other stuff that you don't like, but at the same time, always mention books that you like, because they die. A lot of these books who don't get that, they don't have the money to get the advertisements and different things. They need word of mouth, and if you waste so much time just complaining about books that you don't like, those other books don't get that time at all. You could be talking about them.
Well, these two issues that we talked about on here, the Batwing and Arrow issues, are great examples of books that I happen to be, because we had talked about doing this episode, I happened to be reading at that time to get ready for this episode, and boy, they got me through some really crazy stuff going on. We all have that. That's part of what comics do for me. It's that escape. It's that sense of taking me to a new place, getting me motivated, getting me energized, and stuff like that. So I'm really glad we had an opportunity to talk about just two terrific books that I really got to enjoy. And I'm glad. I want to thank you both again for the opportunity to have this discussion.
Thank you, man. And yeah, like you mentioned, I would love to come back whenever you guys want.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely plan to follow up again in the future, because I would love to talk more about this, because I think this has been really fun.
Oh, no, you don't!
I wanted to quickly shout out the work of Jim Calafiore. He's got this wonderful Kickstarter campaign going on for Crooks and Nannies, which is the web strip that he does over on his website. And I put links in the show notes to Crooks and Nannies. I encourage you to go to check out the Kickstarter campaign. Crooks and Nannies is this wonderful web strip that comes out weekly. He does social commentary. It's a comedy strip. It just makes you think. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm always amazed at the creative talent. And I'm not going to do it justice. You really need to go over and check out. He's got a wonderful video up there. Crooks and Nannies being a web strip means that you can actually go, read it, see it now. And if you love it, support the Kickstarter campaign, which collects it. One of the cool things that he's doing at the trade paperback with this, which I'm a big fan of, not only is he collecting all the strips, but he's also putting in all kinds of bonus behind-the-scenes content that you can only get through collecting the trade. And I'm a big fan of that. It makes it a special package. So make sure to go check out Jim Calafiore's Crooks and Nannies. Joining us is actually, I was going to say friend of the show, but it's more than that. It's actually a family member of the good sensei, Cassie Segulin. And Cassie, welcome to Raging Bullets.
Thank you. Yeah, I love Raging Bullets. I just ran into a guy on the street the other day as I'm walking to get some lunch, and I was wearing my Harley Quinn shirt, funny enough, and he pulls me over. He says, I love your shirt. Harley is my idol. And this, he's class of 2002. So, relatively a long time ago. But we got started, talking about it, and I dropped Raging Bullets. I'm like, hey, my uncle does this podcast, Raging Bullets. Check it out. So I've been dropping the name.
I like it. Yeah, we actually rely a ton on word of mouth, so that's always appreciated to let people know. Well, because podcasting is one of those things that either you know about podcasting and you're like actively searching for things, but there's so many podcasts even now, even if you know about podcasting.
So many.
there's a small population, I feel, still that know about podcasting that actually have MP3 players. Because I think there's a lot of people who have MP3 players don't realize the sheer amount of free content that's available to them through podcasting.
Yeah. Well, and, a lot of my friends will say, I have a Zune. People are like, what's a Zune? It's a Microsoft MP3 player. But I listen to podcasts on my Zune and stuff, and, right now, a lot of college kids are just sort of loaded up with music. But, I used to listen to music podcasts, and I just listened to Tom Harris's book, Red Dragon, which was the one that went before Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And that was all audiobooks or podcasting or something like that. So. Yeah,
I love audiobooks. It's because there's so much I want to read that usually, if I've got a novel going, I'll have an audiobook going. I think I have like ADD when it comes to like content because I just I tend to jump around to a lot of different things.
Don't we all?
Well, I think that's part of the nature of today's culture. You've got a lot of things, a lot of multitasking going on when it comes to entertainment, because if you're trying to keep up with things on the internet and then things on regular television, then on portable devices and on the internet and computers and stuff like that, your YouTube channels and things, it's really hard to keep up with and I think Netflix and Hulu and that kind of stuff throws a whole other curveball in the mix, and television stations that are streaming their television programs. So trying to keep up with everything you might want to be connected to, I think it's very easy to get distracted.
Yeah. Well, especially with comic books, that's why I got a recommendation for Suicide Squad. And I'm going to start up reading Suicide Squad because Batgirl only comes once a month, man.
I got a question for you, seeing as you mentioned Batgirl. Because you see, as we're talking comic books, I want to make sure to this is always kind of cool. How did you get started? Like, how long have you been a comic reader, and what got you started in comics, and why I know the Batgirl love. Obviously, I know why I'm reading Batgirl, but why Batgirl for you?
I sort of just grew up around the whole comic book scene. Jim's been great with comic books, doing the whole Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. And I was really a big Spider-Man fan as a kid, with the swinging from building to building. And I loved his wit and his funny kind of banter. And that was what drew me to, comic books, actually trying to read them. And then when, so I saw, it was back in the 90s, but I saw, I think it was called Batman Beyond. And that was sort of what got me into Batman. And I'm watching the 1994 Amazing Spider-Man, and so I was just really young. And then when they came out with when DC came out with New 52, Dad started picking up the comic books, and he said, "Well, try out this Batgirl." So my sister and I were reading it, and I just sort of fell in love with it because it's great writing. Thank you, Gail. It's great writing, and I love the style of art too. Especially with I just read issue 16. And I love what they've been doing with Joker's face. So it's a completely different interpretation.
Now, you're not reading the rest of the Bat titles, right? You're just reading Batgirl?
No.
How do you, it's because I'm not experiencing that. So I'm interested for a person who's like a regular Batgirl reader. Did you find yourself lost in the story? Or did you find you were given exactly what you needed? Because I can't speak to that because I'm reading everything. So I know those things. Or do you find like the story that's being delivered there is all you need to really enjoy Batgirl's focus in this?
Well, right now I'm really enjoying the story, but when they did the Court of Owls line, I think it was the Court of Owls, I was just so, because they were doing crossovers, and that was, I was just so lost, and I'm calling Jim up, I'm like, what is this Court of Owls thing? Allow me to read all of Wikipedia. But because I don't read the other titles, for lack of time, and poor college students, I don't have enough money for, 52 titles, which now aren't 52, but, but now I love the story, and I love that, that they sort of have a little bit of a background for the characters for the newer readers, but then also have the consistency of the characters for some of the older readers too.
Did you find the Joker stories a little bit more accessible than the Court of Owls for you? Because those two issues really are very heavy Batgirl focused, so it's really her motivations and what her events are that are going through. Because I've liked that about this this Death of the Family storyline. I don't feel like I have to read any of them in a particular order because they seem to be giving me everything I need in their series. But are you experiencing that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and my dad has an old version of Death in the Family with Jason Todd, and he gave me that to read. And I read it, and I enjoyed the Batgirl series, what they're doing with Death of the Family as it is. You know, it's a great story, but then when I read Death in the Family, you know, in conjunction with that, it really, you know, and then the Killing Joke, of course, the three of them are sort of the magic trio, you know, sort of doing nods back and forth, all sorts of stuff.
How did you like Killing Joke? I'm interested as a new reader reading that.
I loved Killing Joke. I absolutely adored it. You know, as much as one can adore, you know, Joker shooting down Barbara Gordon. So, I mean, as a fan of Barbara Gordon, I don't know how much I should enjoy that, but I did. I loved the, I don't know when the last time you read it was, but I loved that they, you know, they have the Joker, but then he's just doing crazy stuff. He's putting impersonators in jail, and at the beginning of the comic, there's not even any dialogue. It's just sort of Batman approaching Arkham, and it's just panels of this art as he's going through Arkham, and you know, sort of doing nods, but there's no need for it. That the art itself and the different panels tells the story, and he doesn't actually start talking till he sees the guy dressed as Joker in Joker's cell. But it's sort of a standalone thing, but it's a lot of fun to read.
I liked that it felt like this Batman's like realizing they are destined and predetermined to head down this path where it's going to end in one of them dying.
Yeah.
And he's like trying to reach out and say, is there something we can do to stop this? To stop this whirlwind that we're on. Only to find out the Joker's gone. He's not actually there. He's talking to some other guy. Imagine that pouring your heart out. You're like, this is my enemy. I'm taking this risk to talk to this lunatic because I feel like I can appeal to him after all we've been through. And you like look at your hand and you got this paint on your hand. Like what?
I loved that. That it's got a human side of Batman. He's not just the Dark Knight, you know, Christian Bale's laryngitis voice. It's real. You know, this is real Batman. This is when, you know, before, you know, he didn't know at the time that Barbara had been shot. But, you know, this is the Batman that comes out when Barbara's shot. This is the Batman that comes out when Jason dies and when he adopts Dick Grayson. And there's just little hints of, you know, this sort of this very real person, that he's more than just, you know, the cowl.
Yeah, I reread, when you said you had just read it recently, I pulled out my copy and reread it, and it amazes me how well this thing has stood up over time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. This story could take place right now, to be honest with you. If we didn't have the cut-off face Joker, who's a little bit more on the extreme side going through with everything that's happened, this story could be thrown right into present day, and I think that's a testament of just, you know, the quality of what came as well as the quality of what's currently. This is a good indication of who Bruce Wayne is, who Batman is, and that was something that kind of impressed me when I was just reading it through it recently.
I liked Barbara in there in the hospital. Like after, you know, Cassie mentioned that, you know, obviously we got to see the horrid thing that happened to her, but the one thing I liked was the strength when you know, Bruce is there and, you know, she's clutching onto him and kind of pouring things out. But I loved that she wasn't just thinking about what happened to herself. This man has her father. You know, that's a concern of hers. I think, to me, that shows, like, what I think is a strength of Barbara. It's not all about her. She can be a very selfless person. In that moment, if it was me, I think I would be, I hate to say it, I think I'd be, I've been shot.
Well, and, you know, I agree with you. You know, I'd be screaming at Bruce, saying, you know, hey, man, like, you know, this doesn't mention any of Jason, but I think it's sort of in conjunction with Death in the Family. You know, when Jason came back, he was pissed off that Batman did not avenge his death. And right, as a young person, I can understand why he was so angry at him. I died, dude. Do something. And it very easily could have happened to Barbara too. That she would have said, "Hey, Bruce, I've been shot. Man, you got to do something about this." But she's very understanding of exactly, of the Batman mojo.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of something interesting. It never really dawned on me on the comparison of the two, because I always thought it was neat with Jason about how he did want the vengeance. He was upset that Bruce didn't avenge him or take out the Joker, but the whole time Barbara is, if not in a situation as bad, if not worse, than being killed. And the whole time she's sticking to the code of the Bat. And I think that's a cool statement of Barbara. Yeah.
Well, and also it's great. I obviously don't know exactly how old Jason and Barbara were, but I'm what am I? I'm almost 20, so I'm right around that age of Barbara and Jason and Dick and Tim, and even when Batman first picked up the cape, he wasn't 45 now that people portray him. He was, as I imagine him to be anyway, sort of younger, like early 30s, mid 30s type, but still trying to get himself out there. But it's sort of, that's what I love about Killing Joke, and especially the new Batgirl, that it really sort of reaches out to the younger folks, that it's, you can identify with the characters, but at the same time, they're so, they're the Bat family. How can you can't top that.
Killing Joke predates Death in the Family.
Yes.
It's right around the same time. I mean, like, it was all 88, 89, but the events of Jason's death actually happened after Killing Joke, which it was a really interesting time to be a reader of this. And there's these big, huge events where the Joker now, who before, he's tying people up to birthday cakes and stuff like that, there were things that were happening in the Bat universe due to the Joker, but never things that had these lasting ramifications. Both what happened to Barbara with her being shot and Jason's death, continuity-wise in comics, lasted for the longest time. I mean, it's only been in recent years that we've, obviously with the New 52, we've got Barbara back and walking again and being Batgirl again, but it's still, that story has resonance. The same thing with what happened in Death of the Family to Jason Todd. That's still something that today in the New 52 has resonance. So it's funny how those stories still from 88, 89 still are having impact today, which shows how important those stories were.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I love about the story is, and especially with Gail's writing, how she actually said, she went to physical therapy. I didn't just, bring them back from the dead. It's okay, guys. Because that was something that always annoyed me with, that's one of the problems I have with some titles, especially when they did, when Marvel did Civil War. No knock on Marvel. They're a great company. But when they did Civil War, and when Spider-Man kind of loses his, somebody's losing memories and somebody goes into space and then everything gets undone with magic. I'm like, you got a story, sticking to it, and, it's lasted since, the Killing Joke and Death in the Family came out in 88, and they're sticking with that continuity of, Jason died, came back, Red Hood, and that's the story. They're not going to undo that, years and years of building up stuff and undo it with Mystic Mojo.
Yeah, that's true across comics, though. The Mystic Mojo you're talking about, usually when there is a death of a character, and that's DC and Marvel and all of comics, they do these things for the purpose of, building the soap opera story where when is the character going to come back and how is that going to happen? Like, I liked what Marvel did with Cap, where they took Cap out of his role from Civil War because, Cap died in Civil War.
Yeah, I didn't read Civil War. I heard about it, but I'm too much of a purist of comics to say you don't just discard your hero-ness for heroes. In my book anyway, heroes are heroes. So
well, it is something that I encourage you to read at some point, because one of the cool things about Civil War was, depending on how you felt, there were various times reading Civil War where you could see like Iron Man's philosophy and Cap's philosophy, and there became some gray areas as far as, is one a hero, one a villain? I don't know that it was that simple in the story. It was really two very different philosophies as far as how the government should handle heroes, which was what led to heroes making the decision to go with one faction or the other. And that's where it actually entered into a lot of politics, which gets very, very tricky in comics. I like that they went there. I don't know that I want to see that all the time, but I thought it was a pretty bold move at the time. But you talk about things that are lasting. It is very rare in comics because these are characters that people want to read. So when you're doing this and you're taking a big risk, like killing a Robin, like what happened in Death in the Family, or shooting Batgirl like they did with Barbara Gordon, and making that last. The fact that they took Batgirl and then gave her a new continuity and made her Oracle, and then Oracle took off, which they don't know that that's going to happen. That's a huge gamble and a risk that, assuming that people are going to want to do something with this character. And actually, there's a character, Oracle, the writers that developed that character and that concept of her now using her skills, what you think about her as the librarian and stuff like that, and using those mental skills to reinvent herself in a way that's, at the time, made her like they used to call her the 911 or the 411, I forget how they worded it, of the DC universe. She was the one that, you would get all your info from, but also I used to think of her as the 911 because they always went to her in a case of emergencies, like, Oracle, I'm in trouble. Get in contact with somebody. She became the one that was like, especially in Morrison's Justice League run, she became the one that they went to like interconnect everybody. And that just, it was a great role for her. Yeah.
Well, and especially, she's got such depth of character that she's able to, that she's been given so many different roles, and that she's using what she learned from being Batgirl, and she's just sort of applying it everywhere. So, I mean, that's why I love her so much.
She's a strong, it's not just good stories being told, it's a strong person. It's somebody that you can feel like, this is somebody I could call my friend. This is somebody who, is real, and there's qualities that I'm like, that's a classic Barbara thing to do. And you learn who that, the classic Barbara moments are very quickly, because it's such a strong, defined who she is role. And then you get these stories like, with dealing with the Joker and the sacrifices she's, making along the route because her mom's, strapped to a bomb, with a couple pounds of nails underneath her and will be shredded, if she doesn't cooperate.
Yeah, like, what are you going to do when your mom's sitting on top of a nail bomb? Your options are kind of limited, but, she's able to think through it and say, and take care of herself.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, the traditional weakness that every hero has is you put the lives of innocents in jeopardy. And the Joker scored a really nice 1-2 punch here, and I still don't think part of me doesn't think he knows. I think it was just dumb luck that he ends up grabbing Batgirl's real life mom. He just had, Barbara Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's, ex-wife. He wasn't thinking this is, Batgirl's mom, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, and you never know with the Joker. It's one of those things, man. And it's the same thing that Batman does. That he knows stuff, and sometimes you're not exactly sure how he knows them, but he'll pull up on his fancy computer of, let me cross-reference. Obviously Joker doesn't have the Wayne Enterprises big fancy stuff, but he just knows things, and he, whether the readers know that or not, or whether it's been defined or not, whether he actually knows stuff. So when he comes up with stuff, when he takes Mrs. Gordon, it's completely plausible to go either way.
Yeah, that's been my enjoyment of Death of the Family. We don't know exactly what Joker knows, and there's been just kind of.
I think I do.
Debates.
I think I do, and I'll tell you.
You think
wait,
you do?
Oh, he doesn't know. I think Cassie's touching on exactly what I love about the Joker. He does catch things, but he doesn't have the concrete info. What he catches is because of street smarts, because of studying people, observing them. He knows how to poke and prod at people to get emotional reactions. He knows how to say just enough to get them to behave the way that he wants them to think the way that he wants them to. For him, having that concrete information is irrelevant to the end game, the emotional reaction, the puppet mastery, the joke of the whole thing. Watch when he interacts. If you take a look at issue 16, the interactions when James Jr. shows up between Barbara, the Joker, and James Jr. The Joker never references the two of them in a way that would make them seem linked. There is no way. This is her brother. He's standing right there. There's nothing that he does at any point in time. If he knew, then he would know that's her brother. And there's nothing in there that indicates that. James Jr. references the mother as Mrs. Gordon whenever he talks to Batgirl. Mm-hmm. And the Joker never does anything to indicate any kind of hinting that he knows the link or play with that or toy with that. Why? Because he doesn't know. He has done just enough that he lets these characters run it in their head. That's why I'm convinced this dude has been brilliant at making them all craft their own fiction. He has told, he referenced in this series, and that's one of the things I love about Gail's writing on this, that he caught her on her patrol route. Well, he totally studied that. And that's one of the things that the Joker, being, the crime master that he is and having the links that he has, he would be able to study and know Batgirl's crime route. And coincidence, yes, but obviously it's not out of the realm of possibility the Joker would go after Jim Gordon's ex. Because these are people that would have tethers and ties to the Bat family and the Bat universe and bring the Bat family running. So he knew exactly what he was doing. I love that about this story. But the James Jr. bits, when James Jr. shows up, that convinced me more and more that the Joker doesn't really know. He knows enough. He's familiar enough to play the game that he's playing, and it's a brilliant, brilliant game. I love how this story is playing out. But I love that the sandbox Gail Simone's playing in, she keeps the questions in your head. Because even though I'm saying that, there is that part of me that's still questioning, well, maybe he does know. Yeah. And I still have that. So I'm not saying that I'm 110%, in that direction. But I'm heavily leaning towards that he doesn't know. But there's just enough. And that's what keeps the mystery interesting. And I'm sure it's the same on the opposite end for the people that are heavily convinced or falling somewhere in the middle that he does know. I think that there's enough of a tether in this because of the great storytelling that people are like, well, but then there's a possibility that he doesn't. And I think that's when you set up a mystery on that level where people can come at it from a variety of different angles and yet have a similar experience with it feeling like this mystery where you don't 100% feel confident in your position, that is a great setup.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, and the funny thing is, with all your arguments that you're saying, I completely agree with everything you've said about why it's a good indicator that he doesn't know. But then just to flip it, just the other side of that is Joker being the Joker, he wouldn't make a mistake like that. He wouldn't tip his hand yet. He's going to reveal what he knows when he reveals it. So if he did know, he wouldn't give us the little clue just because he wouldn't want to give up the knowledge just yet.
Yeah, I can see that point too. I guess what was the point in not saying, though? Because isn't the point to convince them so much that he knows to separate them from Batman?
Well, to mess with you, to mess with things.
Yeah,
it's Go
ahead, Cassie.
Go on.
Well, and I think it's also it's one question of whether he knows or doesn't know, but it's another question entirely of whether he cares. He might know that they're connected, but right now he's trying to sabotage, hurt, whatever. Batman and Batgirl, and that whole thing, and whether he cares that they're related, he might not. And that's one of the great things that Christopher Nolan did with the second Batman movie. He got it, Rachel. He split them up, but it wasn't he didn't care about the past of, Rachel, Bruce, whatever, nor did he care about, Harvey Dent's internal, whatever. It was, he sort of flattened those characters out, and he said, okay, well, point A, Harvey Dent, I'm going to put you in one spot. Point B, Rachel, I'm going to mess with you. And, Jim, Gordon, do whatever. And then he just sort of let his plan go. He's a very simplistic, if you will, planner about these things.
Jim, at the end of the issue, have you read Teen Titans yet?
I have not.
One of the things at the very end of the issue, we keep seeing him, and this has been true of all of the tie-ins, we see him deliver this tray. Well, I think because of the fact that we've seen him deliver it to one person each time, we were under the impression that that was the same tray. It isn't. Every one of them's being given their own tray. Because at the end of Teen Titans, he had 2 of them.
Oh, yeah.
Which means every time he's handing out a tray, they're all getting their own. The one he gave, he's given to each one. So that one he's given to Batgirl, that's her own tray. Now, whatever's underneath there could be related, depending on speculation on what it could be. But that's an interesting twist, because I've been under the impression all along that that's one tray. It's not. The reveal at the end of Teen Titans was that there's 2 of them there, which means these are each one of them's getting their own tray.
I didn't even think about that. I was with you. I was thinking it was, and I read Teen Titans. I forgot. It just didn't dawn on me. So when we're talking about who's underneath the tray, there could be multiple people under. There's a different.
No, it still could be one person.
Different parts.
But it does make for an interesting. This could be personalized. They could be, it could be the thing that links them all together. It could be, I don't know. I don't know what's underneath there. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see, but I'm scared about what we're going to see.
No, I agree with you there, Jim. I was just looking at that last. I've got the book in front of me, and I'm just looking at that last panel, and he says, "Oh, you simply won't believe what I've got under here for you." And he's just standing there. It's full frontal view. It's that Stanley Kubrick kind of exactly symmetrical, but still off a little bit, which I love. And he's just standing there, with this tray. I think just that last panel, without the rest of the book and the story and stuff, just that last panel, is just really, it's just really powerful.
Yeah, and you get cool moments where she was blacked out before this, because they even show just the all black and then the out of focus and then full focus view of him, just that with that creepy smile, permanent smile, and there's you just know something horrific happened while she was out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love the title. I think it's an absolutely excellent title. I'm a big fan of when they do crossovers, when they do it this style, where the creator is able to show a side story set within that. And it's converging. Obviously, this is converging into Batman 17 as it's revealed at the end of the issue. Mm-hmm. But I feel like these two issues here have been really very heavily Batgirl focused. I don't feel like I've been dropped out of the ongoing story with her. We get James Jr. and her finally having their first meet of sorts, since this has happened. That's furthering that story. I want to see where her relationship and obviously where her battles with James Jr. lead after this, because this is going to get pretty nasty between the two of them. But, Jim, you made up an interesting point when we were talking on one of the episodes, and I forget when we were talking about this, about the possibility that what if James Jr. did not free the mom? And he just said he did.
Yeah, maybe that's who's under the tray, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, the mom, Gordon's under the tray. There's a lot of different people that it could be, and
and why do you say who? Because I haven't read any of the other titles. So, has one of the trays already been open?
Oh no, we won't know until probably Batman 17, because that's the finale of this whole story arc. Yeah. Everyone's, there's speculation as to who it could be, and I was thinking the same person, but I'm now I'm now thinking maybe we got different people. We got multiple. And I'm thinking we're going to pull off the, that top part. And we're going to see multiple heads.
We're not ruining anything for her, Jim, though, to say that Alfred's missing.
Yes, Alfred's definitely missing. And I honestly, I don't remember.
Because that doesn't prove it. So that doesn't prove that, like, what's underneath there, so.
True. And I don't remember seeing the last time we saw Commissioner Gordon.
Let me look that up for you. When is the last time that we see Gordon?
It's not in this issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not. Let's see. I've got 15. See, I can pull up 15.
The problem is, even if we have seen him, even in the last month of issues, the chronology of what's going on doesn't necessarily mean it's in that order. Because there's certain events, because Batman is seen, doing other things and fighting other villains in books that are happening during Death of the Family. I mean, like, Detective Comics ties into this. The events that are going on clearly can't be going on at the same time as what's going on in Batman, or what's, they could be going on with what's going on at the same time in Batgirl. But certainly not with what's going on with Batman. We don't know, chronology-wise, when these things happen. Because the Joker can't be with Batgirl at the same time he's with Nightwing. Can't be with Nightwing at the same time that he's with Jason Todd and Tim Drake. So there's a timeline situation here where which is happening first, and I don't think we're ever going to get that spelled out, nor do I think we need to. I kind of like the ambiguity of it, because I think sometimes you paint yourself into a corner, other than the fact that we got to say the Joker managed to pull, because these heroes won't know when these things happen time-wise, right?
Yeah. Well, and it gives that impression of he's everywhere at the same time. Obviously, he can't be. Logistically, that'd make it really tough. That's sort of his whole thing, of he just pops up and disappears and pops up, and he's sort of doing all this. And I feel like he has a giant calendar in his lair or whatever, of Monday torture Barbara, Tuesday pick on Nightwing, type thing, and that's completely plausible for him to do that kind of thing. But and also the readers can buy into it.
Well, the last page, Jim, we were pretty convinced in the last discussion we had about this. Well, not pretty convinced. It makes logical sense. She's now in the same place that when she wakes up, she's in the same place that Nightwing is, that Jason Todd is, that Tim Drake is. They're all in the same facility with Batman at that point. That's how it's all going to come to a head. That's why they're all getting the trays at the same time. They're being prepared for this dinner.
Together now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that would make sense. Like, that's kind of... that would mess with them even more.
Let me ask you this, Cassie. As a reader, and there's no right or wrong answer to this, I'm just kind of curious how you handle situations like this. Like, the end of this story, it says, to be concluded in Batman number 17. Is that something you'll read to see what happens with this, or are you just going to go on to Batgirl number 17 and then kind of figure out what happened? How do you plan on handling? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious. How do you handle that as a reader when it's hit with you that way? Are you just going to wait and see if Gale addresses it in 17, or are you going to pick up Batman?
Well, I am definitely going to pick up Batman 17 because, I feel like I'm just so invested in the story now. Even though I've just been getting the one side of Batgirl with it, I'm definitely going to pick up 17 because it says, specifically, this, whatever is going on, is going to be specifically in that issue. So, and, yes, I'll continue with Batgirl and reading 17 and, whatever issues there are to come after that. But the team that put this together said specifically, it's all going to go down.
Well, and Gale isn't writing 17.
Yeah.
17 and 18 were the fill-in issues. And I've heard the guy who's doing the fill-ins, I'm not familiar with him or his work, but the buzz I've heard on the internet is that he's talented, so I'm anxious to read. It's funny, now that I know she's back on the book with 19, I'm very anxious to read his issues just to get exposed to him as a writer. So I'm cool with it now because I know that I'm going to get her back on the book, and maybe I'll become a fan of his work and follow whatever material he's doing. It's funny how I'm in a very different place with him now, jumping in, knowing that we're getting her back. I know it's an interesting.
We like him now.
Yeah. Well, and I would have honestly, I would have given him a chance anyway because I love the character. I would have given him a chance, but my preference obviously is she's laid out so much in this series that needs to be. needs to be gradually paid off. Like there's not a 1 or 2 issue tie up to the myriad of really cool threads she's got going right now. I want to see a nice lengthy run where we can see these things play out the logical way that she intends them to. So I'm excited to see where this is all going to go under her tutelage. So that part has me really geeking out.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that she isn't going to wrap it up in 2 issues. Because, I mean, I'd probably be a little disappointed. In general, you know, if they just did one fell swoop and said, okay, here are all the knots tied up nice and tight, let's start the next arc. So, but I think that some of this is definitely going to leak over into the next, or I hope so anyway, leak over into the next line. That this isn't going to be, you know, and they lived happily ever after. Let's do another line.
Well, with her jumping back on with issue 19, I'm sure she's going to continue her threads that she's been doing all along, and we're going to get to see them play off. My big worry is, and this happens, you know, it's one of the frustrations in any serialized medium, and that includes television when a series is cut short. You know, a lot of times you get very invested in the characters and the direction that the writers are putting it in. I think it's why in TV nowadays you get occasionally these very special television series where the writers are taking a risk to develop long-form story. And I'm a big fan of that because, you know, I want my episodic payoff of, you know, like I'm very satisfied with this week's show, but I also want to feel like there's some gripping twists and turns that aren't going to be paid off for 4, 5, 6 years in a show because I want to get that invested in it. Comics are the same way. You know, for me, I've been reading Batgirl since issue 1 this run, and I've loved the new villains being introduced. You know, gradually at first, the villains that were introduced it felt like they were for the purpose of showing us different facets of what Batgirl's gone through. But then we see this great reveal that, no, they're now being pulled out of prison and being all linked together for this purpose that we haven't quite seen yet. And I want to see that when it comes through, see them tied in with Nightfall when that time comes. And that's the great thing about this series. There's a lot more, you know, and then there's James Jr., which is totally separate from all of that, even though he got kind of involved with all that. Which is
a little bit.
Yeah, he's I love that he's like this crazy puppet master that just kind of pops in, and that was something that was pulled from Snyder's work in Detective Comics and has been so brilliantly used here because there was never really an opportunity to go heavy in depth with how Batgirl would feel about him and dealing with him, you know, where it would be dealing with him heavily involved in her life like this. That's going to be, I think, fantastic. How's she going to feel about the roommates or ex-roommates or whatever that status is, involvement with him? You know, not that she knew anything. What I mean is, you know, this is really, he got involved in her life to that level that he was heavily messing around with a roommate. That's something.
The roommate's there.
Yeah,
right.
James Jr. brought her.
No, but Jim, we still haven't seen Barbara. Like, Barbara hasn't had an opportunity to process or address that. That's what I'm saying. I want to see that. Like, I want to see the conversation between the two of them because this is going to be shocking for Barbara.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and definitely to, you know, she hasn't. I don't think Barbara's quite put together the gift with the cat. It was a couple issues back when James says, you know, here, have this cat, Alaska. And she just looks at it. She's just like, I had a cat just like that when I was younger. But she hasn't put them together yet. That, you know, somebody named the cat Alaska, you know, and it wasn't subtle hints by Barbara saying, by the way, Alaska's a great name. It was something completely independent. And you guys are right. Right when Batgirl is beating up the mooks, they do outside the church where Alicia's there and says, I never should have had this guy pick me up. And that's the one panel. Well, there's 2 panels. The other one says, who are these people?
But Barbara doesn't know she's there.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's been no dealing between Barbara and her. She's there, but it's like they're there together, but not. And I want, like, Barbara has no idea yet that she's involved with James Jr. So there is a story there that I don't want it to pay off quickly. It was what Cassie was mentioning earlier. That's stuff that I don't want in a 2-issue tie-up. I want to see that, you know, this is something that, like, can be teased and played over time. Like, when is she going to find out? When is she going to go, oh, God, this has been all along like this? And how is she going to feel about that? Because she, technically being with the roommate, which is something she's already addressed with leaving. That's why it's the ex-roommate. She feels like that her worlds come converging into that. How is she going to feel after finally discovering how deep her world came into her roommate's life? It's just, I think that's cool stuff to pay off down the road.
Okay.
I want to see that.
Yeah, the realization she has, or when she has that moment of, oh no, James Jr., when she has that moment, I think that's going to be some cool story, because I think that's going to bring the roommate back into Barbara's life. She's going to know, as she initially separated her to try to keep her safe, well, separating her won't keep her any safer. If anything, she needs to be around the roommate to keep her safer. So I'm thinking we're going to see, once again, the roommate coming back in and maybe even bringing the roommate into the secret.
Well, but here's the thing, though. What if Barbara encounters her as Batgirl and discovers all this?
Right.
The roommate doesn't necessarily need to know Barbara was even involved. It could go either way. So it'd be very interesting to see if she does come in on the secret or not, or if Barbara sees the reason to keep it a secret, or if the roommate accidentally discovers this. There's all kinds of different places this could go, which is, I think that's compelling. I think that's really, really cool, because I love when there's like 5 different possibilities on the table, and it could be the 6th one that we're not even thinking of.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely agree with you guys that, right now they're not living together, but it could have been one of those, and I'd hate for this to happen to me, of the awkward moment when your roommate finds your super suit in the laundry. Of, hey, Barbara, what's this? It looks like it's my cosplay. I'm cosplaying as Batgirl, as kind of, that they've got some real interaction there. That, that the roommate is sort of that Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, minus the romantic interest of, she's someone who's very involved in Barbara's life.
I'd like that, because to me, supporting cast is essential, and the roommate's an interesting character. I would like to see her continue on in the series if she survives all this, because I really do find her to be it's a different sort of world, and that relationship of having the roommate. You mentioned your love for like Spider-Man earlier, and Batman Beyond and stuff like that. One of the things I always loved about Spider-Man was your Flash Thompsons and working at the paper and, being friends with the people in the bullpen at the paper and, all that kind of stuff. And the relationships like Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy and all that stuff. That, to me, is what made Spider-Man essential, was these were identifiable characters. I think anybody who knows Peter Parker knows Mary Jane Watson. You know J. Jonah Jameson. Flash Thompson. Betty Brant. These are all characters that have a resonance. I like seeing in Batgirl's solo comic, we're seeing characters get developed and flashed out that are exclusive to Barbara. And that's what the roommate is. She's one of those characters, and a villain cast that is being gradually developed that is exclusive to her. You can get the Batman villains popping in like we got right now, but you can also have her developing her own cast, and that's what makes the book unique and has its own feel and flavor. And those are the things I want to see pay off in this title.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there that they're sort of creating an entirely a whole new world. Thank you, Aladdin.
Oh, come on, you can sing it. A whole new world, a new fantastic point of view.
You know what I loved about that? I like that you said that correctly, Jim. You told her that she could sing it.
Yeah. Raging Bullets karaoke night. This is what this is.
Oh, my.
You can get it in stereo, Norge.
Wait. I agreed with you that she could sing it.
We're sorry about this one, listener. The roommate and Mary Jane and stuff are not NPCs anymore. For all of us gaming folk, you got your Barbara Gordon and you got your Joker and stuff, and the playable characters. And then, there's always NPCs of Paperboy or, in the movies you see Girl Number 1, who, she gets to scream. But, a lot of these secondary casts are playable characters or actual dimensional identifiable characters. So
I like your gaming comparison. Obviously, you're using role-playing game ones, which have a lot of fun too. Because one of the great things is the roommate to me is one of your traveling companions.
yeah,
And the great part about those characters is they have more than one or two lines. And usually, as the game further develops, the longer you get to know that character, the more that their backstory gets fleshed out. And there's usually twists and turns that go along with that. Like, I want to know the roommate's backstory because unless her intention was to I can't imagine her being created for the purpose of being cannon fodder.
no.
Unless it's James Jr.'s cannon fodder, which would obviously have an emotional place with Barbara. But I really feel like this is a character who's probably got a story that we want to hear.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, and it's a personal thing too. I mean, like, I feel like I could be this roommate standing outside some abandoned church saying, "Oh, James, I'm so scared. You gave me a cat, thank you, but I need you to come pick me up," type thing. And she's young. She sees some, charming guy on the street, goes on a couple dates, he gives her a cat, coolio, but she's getting pulled into this, that she's very identifiable, especially with the younger readers, of, I've got a roommate, and if I were Batgirl, the last thing I would want is, my roommate following me around, but, you can feel that fear and that sort of like, I don't know about this, man. This is kind of weird.
You were mentioning Killing Joke. I actually want to shout out something that I noticed in Killing Joke, and it'd be great. I have the deluxe edition of Killing Joke, and for anybody that had the original, the great thing about that was recolored by Brian Bolin. So if you see the original one, there's a lot of differences in the way, even right down to the bat symbol, to how that book was colored the second time through. And I love that Bolin kind of made it his. It's the same story, same panels, but the color work is totally different. So there were slight tweaks and changes and things. There's a sequence, I don't remember ever noticing this. When the doctor's describing the bullet going through her spine, I'm afraid her legs are completely useless. He's grabbing her legs and shaking them to show her. I never noticed this before. I'm like, this is like the cruelest sequence ever. Like, isn't it enough to just say that? What do we need validation here? I don't know why I never noticed that, but he's doing that there. And this is one of my favorite stories. I've read this. You were asking me when was the last time I read it. I read it last night because Jim had made mention to me that you had read it recently. And I'm like, well, I'm figuring we're probably going to casually throw this in and discuss it, so I wanted it fresh in my head. I haven't read it since the deluxe edition came out. When the deluxe edition came out, I grabbed it right away because, especially when hearing that Bolin, I own it, the original, I've still got that. Yeah. But hearing that Bolin was going to completely redo it and it was going to be on a little bit of the oversized release, I love those deluxe editions because they're just a little bit bigger, which means the art's a little larger. But him doing those little tweaks to it and having the story in the back was worth it to me.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I ever noticed, because you can see the motion lines around what he's doing. He's actually picked up the legs. I don't mean he's shaking them like he's putting a tremor on or anything, but he's certainly moving them enough to just validate the fact that she doesn't. It's like borderline cruel.
I'm looking at the panel right now, Sean, and she's at this point he's shaking her legs and she's unconscious. If I were Barbara, I would have, if I had use of my legs, I probably would have kicked him in the head saying, "Hey man, this isn't cool." But, obviously she can't because her legs are useless. But, and then there's the, detective-ish guy. I think he's on the lower panels. It looks like he's got like a ketchup stain or something on his tie, or it's not, but, it's some kind of smudge something. His hair's all disheveled and it's sort of.
That's Bullock.
That's Bullock.
Oh, see, I don't know who that is.
Well, no, he's everything. Actually, I'm more agreeing with everything you're saying, Cassie. That's Bullock. I'm saying that everything you're saying about him, that's who he is. So, no, you're nailing it. You're fine.
There probably is a ketchup stain on his tie, or possibly blood.
Yeah. Well, and it's some ugly polka dotted, know nothing detective tie. This isn't like, classy, I'm gonna go, take care of Barbara, yes sir, for the good of Gotham type thing. This is like, all right, I'm getting paid to do this. And Okay, no, I thought this was like a donut or something he was eating, but it's a light. He's lighting his cigar up with a match. I thought for a moment he had like food crumbs on him or something.
Oh, that's probably there too.
Yeah.
He's there too. Well, when the doctor, I'm looking at the panel, when the doctor is shaking her legs, he's sort of just standing there, and you see, actually, I just noticed this. Batman's you get the little tiny Joker card in the scene as he's shaking her legs.
Yeah. Yeah, and the cool thing with Bullock is, because he's a character that you probably haven't had too much exposure to, but he actually isn't just there for the paycheck. Bullock actually does care about the Gordon family. He comes across as being that gruff guy, and what you're seeing, but when you read a couple stories with him, you see the kind of guy he is, and he legitimately respects and admires Jim Gordon. So I thought that was something kind of cool, seeing those sequences, seeing him by her side, because Gordon couldn't be there, so he's going to stand watch. This wasn't just going to be somebody else; he's taking the watch. And then when Bat's there, he leaves Bats alone with her just because he knows that Batman has that connection with the Gordon family. So I thought those were some really cool sequences.
Definitely.
It's a great book. I agree with you, Jim, when you mentioned earlier how it holds up, because it is a story. Actually, we should ask Cassie this, because you have read it the freshest out of all of us. Did the story feel contemporary to you?
It did. It definitely did. Well, and it's believable. It's contemporary. Obviously, it doesn't have smartphones and stuff like that, but it doesn't need it. It's that timeless kind of, even from the beginning of the book, it's raining, it's dark, Batman walks right past the secretary and goes right into where he needs to be. And, it's that timeless kind of lovable, lovable loosely, obviously there's pain and suffering, but it's that, there's the circus freaks and the conflicted husband as he's trying to care for his pregnant wife, and that whole thing.
I thought the absence of a lot of technology was, I don't think it was intentional, but it certainly kept the story from feeling dated. Like the use of the Batmobile, it was an older classic style Batmobile, but it's not unlike Batman to pull one of those out of the, he usually has like a garage full of them, and that'll happen from time to time. The Batmobile gets changed up, so that worked. There is very little in this issue that would identify it as being from a particular era. And I thought that was, it really, I think, adds to the whole sense of, I can't really pin down when this is happening. Yeah.
Well, and even with the camera scene, when right after Barbara gets shot, and actually before she gets shot, when she goes to answer the door, and it's Joker and the gun in the camera, I'm a photo major. So, he's using film. It's probably 88. He's probably got like a manual wind back. But, knowing it's completely believable that he would shoot this on film, he actually has to roll back the film and then click it and then rewind it to develop it. But it's completely plausible that he would use the film and develop the film and, print this stuff. Because it's as a photo major, it takes a lot of care and effort. And, you have to look at the images. And, it's not just a matter of importing them to your computer. That's not what the Joker would have done. He wouldn't have walked up with a little point and shoot and said, I'm going to take some pictures of you. He would have taken that time and that care to sort of revel in the fact that he shot Barbara.
I love that he's dressed up like he's on vacation.
He is dressed, yeah. Well, and he's got his little palm trees and with the hat and and he's right when Jim Gordon says what have you done to my daughter, that whole thing, that Barbara asked him why are you doing this? This is to prove a point. Here's to crime. And he raises his glass to crime. So and the technology doesn't matter for that. If anything, the technology makes it all that more powerful because Joker's putting that much thought and care into exactly, the camera he uses, or the car that Batman drives, or, he doesn't whip a flask out, he pours the drink because he's going to revel in the fact, he's definitely thought this out.
He's taking his time with it. He's savoring the moment.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the action, it's about the process behind it. It's what it's going to do. And this is, these are just classic Joker mindsets where it's not just about X. It's about how X affects Y, which affects Z, which, hey, let's bring back A.
Yeah,
and it's it's the psychology and the confusion and the craziness and just the general whatnot of the Joker.
Yeah. He threw it in there.
Had to go in there at least once.
No, it really didn't.
Yes, it did. I get emails from people if I don't use it, and same thing with the singing.
Who are these people?
Hey, I would email Jim saying, hey man, where's my whatnot?
It sounds like a condition.
I've heard it used around campus. I use it. I think it's just a general Segulin thing.
Is it?
Where, it's the... And...
What does it mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you?
Whatnot?
Yes.
It's just sort of a... And with the mumble. It's sort of like a trail off kind of... And there's some stuff there somewhere.
You know what? I love that. I like the first part. It's just the general mumble. No, it is one of those things that it's funny when I edit the show. One of the things I find that I do a lot, and it's a way to collect your thoughts a lot of times too. I do and I'll go through and I'll cut out certain things. I'll try to catch and stuff like that we all do, and you can't catch every one of them. I used to in the insane when I'd edit the show. I used to try and catch every single one of them. And the amount of time I was spending on editing, I'd spend like sometimes 12 hours working on a podcast, editing it. And you can't keep that pace up. I mean, it just, something has to give. So I eventually got a lot more judicious on it. I spot check as I go through, and anytime I see them I can actually see them in the sound waves, I'll catch them and delete them, as I go through. But I don't go to catch every single one. But I do That's my whatnot. I'm collecting my thought, but I'll do this lengthy and, I add like N's and D's in there that should not be in the word and. Just extend that out long enough to get that thought down there. And you're right, that's what the whatnot's the mumble. So as much as I joke around about it, I do get it. It's very funny.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the British comedian Eddie Izzard, and he sort of does that sort of mumble, but he doesn't have whatnot, but he has a mumbly kind of, he was talking about different vitamins, in food and stuff, and he goes, vitamin A is good for, vitamin B is good for, vitamin C is good for scurvy. But he sort of just, he does, he sort of has that same kind of identifiable mumble. So.
Are there...
It's the power of whatnot. It's spreading.
Yeah, you are the sensei.
Cassie, are there comic book stories? You mentioned Killing Joke, having read that, and Death in the Family, you've read that. Are there comic book stories since you've been kind of more indoctrinated recently into this? Although it seems like, have you always been a constant comic reader, or has there been lulls, or how does that work for you?
Right now, I'm really into the comic book scene, especially within the past 5 or so years. I've really been into the scene. Especially since now I can take a lot of the more adult lines. It's not just Kid Titans and their merry band of whatevers. But, now that I can take some of the more adult lines and that I can, check out my own comics, like I said, I'm going to start reading Suicide Squad soon.
Yeah, that's cool.
To get my Harley fix, because we all love Harley.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, so I've been reading different titles there, but and I lost my train of thought.
No, I went down that path because there's actually another question I have that's in there. Mm-hmm. Do you mentioned reading a couple classic storylines. Do you have like certain stories that like you're saying, I've heard about this? Do you have like a list of some stories that maybe 3 or 4 that you're anxious to read that you haven't gotten a chance to get to yet? Like arcs or trades or series that you want to jump on that maybe you haven't had a chance to? Because you mentioned one of the things I know, because I've been there before, the tough part in college is trying to find a budget to be able to maintain any form of regular comic hobby. It's hard to do that. And I've had times where I went down to 1 or 2 titles for the same purpose you are. So I totally can relate to everything you're saying. I had to go through that when I was going through college. It's very hard because you hear about all these cool stories. Is there something that you haven't had a chance to read that you're like, this is on my bucket list of, I've heard people talking about this. I really want to get to this.
Kind of old school, but I do want to read the Dick Grayson turning into Nightwing. Like that when he first
Teen Titans.
Okay, that's Teen Titans, but I know about Dick Grayson, Flying Graysons, Robin, and I know about Nightwing, rough, but I'd love to see that transition of when Dick does his own thing. And I'd love to read some more about Dick and Barbara, because I heard they had a thing at some point. But, that'll take some digging around, obviously. But right now I don't have any particular storylines that I know of that I've been itching to read.
That's kind of the cool part, though, is being able to kind of dabble around and see what sticks. There's a lot of material out there. And I encourage you to actually check out libraries because there's just a tremendous amount through interlibrary loans and stuff like that. I wish there was I did read stuff from libraries when I was in college, but it wasn't available, I don't think, on the accessibility that there is today. Because I hear from listeners all the time that are pulling full runs. I checked our Menor library, and just going through the various Menor libraries through their online catalog now, they have full runs of things like Ultimate Spider-Man, for example. They have like every trade. It's Batman, all the major trades that have been coming out are available there. So, I mean, there's just, and those are major characters that I'm throwing out, but nowadays, not even just the major characters, there are a lot of, the supporting cast, B and C list characters that have really interesting, terrific stories that maybe you missed that you can grab and read and see if it's your cup of tea with, I believe that grabbing those books from the library does support the comic industry because it lets the library pays attention to things that are being checked out. And the more stuff's being checked out, the more they're going to purchase that type of material because it's drawing an audience to the library. They have to make decisions with their budget based on what people are asking for. And I encourage listeners, anybody listening to this, if you're checking out comics from the library, make requests if there's something that's not there. Because we've had friends of the show on who are librarians, and they've suggested doing that. And I can't agree with that more. Making sure that they're purchasing the things that you really want to read and check them out and recommend them to people. Because that helps the comic industry getting those books in libraries. Just because it's another purchase for them, and it also just builds an audience base. But there's a lot of just terrific material available to libraries for people who are on a budget saying, hey, money's tight right now, but I still want my fix. And it's a great way to kind of, like you said, when you're waiting for the 3 weeks for the next issue to come out, it's a great way to fill that material with a good trade or something like that on the side.
Yeah. Well, and there's a friend of mine who's a film and video major who recommended, I think it was called Dark Knight Returns. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like, it is similar to Dark Knight Rises, the movie, but it's a book. But he encouraged me to check that out, too. So when that comes back in the library, because somebody's having a good time reading it right now, I'm going to check that out and give it a read. So, because that's one of the things that I've been trying to do as well, is get different perspectives of, Batman. I saw the Batman movies. I watched The Brave and the Bold, which was animated, but I think that's a great way to sort of, as you said, get the fix, is check out, even if it's the same title or different titles, just different adaptations of it.
The Dark Knight Returns kind of kicked off a lot of what you were reading with Killing Joke and with Death in the Family. That came out in 86. Okay. And it's a Batman story. Batman's retired, and that's at the beginning of it. So it's a really cool story. We're actually going to do it on the show as a part of our 350th, which is coming up at the end of March. So we're going to do a whole Frank Miller thing, and one of the stories, because it's been released as an animated release, the two-part animated release. We're going to do both. We're going to kind of compare and contrast them. So it's cool, actually. If you end up reading it, you can kind of listen to the episode and see our like vibe on it, because it's a really, really cool. Actually, if you end up reading it prior to that, let us know, and we can pull you in, and it'd be great to get fresh, feedback on it, what it's like, as a new reader reading Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and as a college student, when Dark Knight Rises came out as a movie, I was just starting college, and it's a huge thing over here. Christopher Nolan and the movie industry has done a great job bringing the comics to the viewers, listeners, readers, whatever, and made it accessible. Where I've got one guy that I know who is constantly doing Bane impressions. He'll say something and then he'll throw in a Bane quote. We're like, okay, thank you. But the people that'll watch the movies and the TV shows might say, hey, I really like this character, I'll check out a title.
Cassie, one of the things I want to make sure we get to, because you mentioned this before we started recording, where do you get your comics?
I'm glad you asked, Sean. There's a local comic book shop, Locust Moon, that is near 40th Street. So for all of us Drexel U Penn people, it's I think it's Locust and 39th or something like that. But it's right by the McDonald's. It's right along there, and it's got the little locust bug on there. So, and they're really nice, they're really great, and they've got comic books, and they've got a bunch of other stuff, too. But I went in, I was looking for a local comic book shop, because, the last thing I want to do is text my dad saying, hey, can you mail me all of the comic books you get for the next 4 years?
Well, you could do that to him.
I could do that to him. Yeah, if I want to have to pay for college on my own. I think he might stop paying for college if I make him pay for postage every month.
And right now, your dad's listening to this, and he's saying, or you could text your uncle and have him do it.
Oh, he is. Yeah. And we don't have a third roommate, Jim, so you can just, stay with us and just bring all your comic books over.
I got a feeling your roommate would not exactly agree with that statement.
Yeah. Well, we live on a girls' floor, so I'm pretty sure the other 40 girls would not agree with that statement. But I'm not quite sure where to follow up from there.
Well, there's just so many things I could say right now, but I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut, because I'm gonna get myself in trouble.
Jim. My father is listening, so hold on.
Jim, if I can shout something out, I want to make sure to do this, and there's not really a good time to do this, but I want to make sure I don't forget it. I will periodically shout out Kickstarters.
Yeah.
And Jim, we're big fans of things like Tiny Titans and Superman Family Adventures. Art and Franco have put up a Kickstarter for Aw Yeah Comics, which is all ages comics. And I know you've been, Jim, buying issues of that for family, for younger family, because it's hard to find really good, high quality, fun, all ages material. So they actually have different pledge levels. They're 29 days to go. They've already hit their funding goal. Their funding goal is $15,000. They've gone beyond that. But what they've done now is, seeing as they've already hit their funding goal, they've entered a new level. Like, I originally pledged the $30 pledge to get the first 6 issues. Well, now they've added a funding goal because of that. They said, well, now that we clearly have enough funding to keep going, we're going to try to double our funding expectations and go through the first 12 issues, the first year of it. Because they weren't sure, as with any Kickstarter, it's kind of, wonder if are people going to get behind this or not, or things like that. But with this Kickstarter, you get an exclusive digital issue that's only going to be released through the Kickstarter. So it's an exclusive issue that, being a part of this And I like to shout out these projects, especially when they're ones that are near and dear to our heart. And these Kickstarter fundings are a great way for people to get independent comics out there to the general public. And as a teacher, I'm a big fan of all ages material. I really want to shout this out because huge fan of both of those titles. And sorry, I know it's kind of a weird place to put it in, but I don't want to end this discussion without at least getting the word out about this Kickstarter. And there'll be links in the show notes to it. And, of course, I don't know if your comic shop, Locust Moon, has a website, but if there is, I will make sure to put that in the show notes as well so people know how to get to it.
They do. I'll send you a link for it. It's locustmoon.wordpress.com.
Got it.
When you go in, it says Locust Moon Comics and Movies, your friendly neighborhood comic book shop, and there's a picture of a locust. So
that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, your friendly neighborhood comic book shop.
Yeah, that's one of the. So in the show notes, you'll find the links to the Kickstarter and also to Locust Moon, and so you don't have to write any of those things down. They'll be right in the show notes for the episode, or you can grab them right from our website and just click, which is always nice too.
Yeah.
Cassie, do you have anything else you want to shout out, or anything you want to mention comic book wise? That's.
I'm not sure.
No, that's okay. It wasn't more of a we're putting you on the spot. No, I wanted to make sure we weren't missing something that you really wanted to get to.
No. So, but yeah, and I'll definitely. I told Locust Moon when I stopped in to get my Batgirl. I said, hey, Uncle does this podcast. I'll drop your name in there. So I'll do the other side of that and walk in and say, hey. Episode, I don't know what episode this is for you guys, but
we don't know yet either.
You haven't numbered these things yet.
Well, no. It's we did this as kind of an impromptu segment, so I am going to figure out the best way to release this ASAP because the material we're covering, especially with the Batgirl, is pretty contemporary, and pretty current. So I want to make sure to get that on a current show. So I don't know yet. I have a couple of ideas which I'll kind of play around with, but it's going to be in the next week or so. It's going to be released. I'll actually tell you right now, it's either going to be 340 or 341.
Okay, excellent. So,
well, we know definitely. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I'll tell my friends, hey, by the way, I've got an hour of, in case you don't hear me talk enough. Talking about if you're not sick of me yet.
All right. Jim, let's go ahead and just do like a little closing to this then. Cassie, I want to thank you for coming in and joining the show. And, keep us posted on your reading of The Dark Knight Returns. If you end up having a chance to read it, over the next couple months before we hit the end of March, let us know. And then if you hit it afterwards, let us know too, because timing-wise, depending on when you have read it with when we're recording it, we can either bring you in for part of our recording when we do it, or we can bring you on afterwards as a follow-up to that recording when you do. Because I'd love to get a new reader's viewpoint on Dark Knight Returns. Because Jim and I have both... Jim, you've read Dark Knight Returns, right?
Yeah.
It's the sequel that you haven't read.
Right.
Okay. So it'd be kind of cool to get a new reader's perspective to Dark Knight Returns, what it's like to read it now for the first time. Because Jim and I are both going to have that link to reading it in the past. So very similar to your Killing Joke. I was fascinated to hear how you felt about it reading it now. If it felt the same way to you, and it seems like it did, as it did to me in the day reading it when it first came out, and I was like, what did they just do?
Yeah, definitely. And Jim's been asking me to do a running commentary of the Batman movies, which I started doing, and then I realized that there's long pauses, and then I just go, oh, that hurt. But I'll try and put something like that together and send that to you guys, because Jim's been asking for a running commentary.
It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll make it work.
We'll make it work.
All right.
So yeah,
Well,
thanks for having me, guys. I'll definitely look forward to we could talk about comics and bats and
Oh my.
oh my.
No, come on. Bats and whatnot, oh my. It's like...
Yeah.
I think you did that one time on the show.
Yes, I have. I've done it a couple times. A couple different times.
Yeah. Jim gets very Wizard of Oz with his whatnots.
I am the great and powerful sensei.
Please close the curtain.
Well, and Sean, you missed this before, but Jim and I were talking, cultural references. I said something about, living in some humble little dorm room. And, we're dropping the, with great dorm comes great responsibility. One dorm to rule them all. It's the dorm I need right now, not the one I deserve. Batman much. we did a whole... This goes past just the recording of the show, Sean.
The Dorm of Solitude? Yeah,
the Dorm of Solitude, yeah. Yeah.
I'd say the invisible dorm, but how would you know how to get back?
Oh, dang it. Keep running into it. And...
Yeah. Although, depending on who walks through the door, you might wish it was.
Dormer requirement. Yeah, now we're just getting into the Harry Potter world. This is...
Well, only if you take a train to get there.
Yeah. Well, we get a SEPTA line, so it goes the Frankfurt, I think like the Frankfurt line, Broad Street Frankfurt line, and it goes east and west. So I'll go down to First Street, and there's great places for coffee, and there's a couple of good confectionery places there down on First Street. But I'll take the train back, or subway or whatever, right back to my dorm, and then pass out. It happens. I take the train.
That's cool. So you can do the Harry Potter reference then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and I grew up with Harry Potter, so this is God. I don't even know when the book came out, but I remember I was in like 3rd grade or something like that. And we're all trying to figure out how to pronounce Hermione. We're all Hermione and Hermione. And then when the movie finally came out, they said Hermione. We're like, oh, so we've all been pronouncing it wrong. So
when I first started teaching, the first book was really popular. I don't remember if it was the first year or the second year. And there became a question about whether or not you read it at school, because that was the witchcraft controversy with the first book, before people kind of really knew what it was all about, and realized that it was a story about a boy, who really was an outcast, trying to fit in and find the place that he belongs. Once people realized that's what the story was about, it took a different turn. But I remember I remember wondering whether or not it was okay for me to read it to my students, because I didn't want any parents to be upset over the whole witchcraft controversy. Not because I felt that the book had that. It was more of I didn't want anybody who hadn't read it to think that I'm reading books about witchcraft to my students. I thought it was cool that kids were into a book. I think that's really, really fantastic. Any book that draws kids in and gets them interested in reading, I think was a good thing. And that was one of the strengths of Harry Potter, is it made books cool, and I think that still exists. Yeah, well, and it definitely, and it spawned, I'd hate to say we're the Harry Potter generation, but it came out, first book was published in 1997, so I was like 4, I think. But, 93, yeah, I was 4 when the first book came out, so I was getting into school, and then, the last one came out 2007, so I was 8th grade, I think, if I'm doing my math right, but, I grew up with this, first learning how to read big girl books, more than just, Angelina, or what was it, like Angelina Ballerina or something like that? It was a mouse, but it was full length, big words, books. Jim, you've been reading Angelina Ballerina, haven't you?
Oh yeah. I got the full Angelina set.
I probably think of the wrong name. I forget what the actual...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's...
See, now I have to look it up. It is Angelina Ballerina. A fictional mouse created by author Catherine Hollibird. Thank you, Catherine Hollibird, for this one. So I was right about that one. Angelina Mouseling. So put that on your bucket list of good reads.
I'll wait for the movie. No, I'm kidding. It's funny, actually. When it comes to books, I'm constantly looking for books for myself, but then also, books for my classroom and things like that for the kids, because I try to have as much diverse material in my classroom libraries, because, when you got 24 kids, every one of them is going to have very different tastes as far as what they're going to click with, and it's hard to, make sure you have something that might appeal to everybody.
Yeah, well, and it's the same with high school, college. I just got out of high school, man, and we're all trying to find books that speak to us personally or as an age group or something, something along those lines. And then when one of us finds a book, that's how these cult books come along. Is you get one person in high school or middle school to read them and say, "This is really cool," loan it out to all their friends, and then next thing you know, it's a big thing. So, but it's just that, books, written books and comic books and, that the whole reading thing is just really powerful. And, and I'm glad it's still a thing, that people are still willing to read and discuss and, that whole thing.
Well, I think e-readers have made it cool again.
Yes.
In the sense that there's electronic devices, and not even just e-readers, your tablets and things all have apps that link into the e-readers now, which is really great, because I think the accessibility, you can be reading on an e-reader or on a laptop or something like that, and then jump over to a tablet, and you can pick up where you left off, which is the same experience that you would have plopping a bookmark into a paperback, and I think that's pretty essential. If you can't feel like electronically that you're taking your book with you, you're going to lose something to the experience. And so I think that's created a new culture to the book lovers market, which is great, because I think you've got the people that are the diehards that love the feeling of the paper. They collect their hardcovers or their paperbacks, and then you've got this middle of the ground culture that likes a little bit of A, a little bit of B with the electronics and stuff like that, and then regular paper. And then you've got your full electronic culture, which I've become a big e-reader fan. I love having 7 or 8 books on my e-reader and just being able to, based on my mood, pick up what I want to read and do it that way. And I think that's one of the great things, because your big worry whenever technology starts taking over is, what are we going to lose? And when you see something morphing where you can still get that same experience through electronics, and yet you're not taking it away from the people who still like the classic, you then can connect the people that are reading electronically with the people that are reading paper. And that's where, like you said, you're getting those great discussions still, because we're all able to read the same things and be a part of it.
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you say that, it's creating an entirely new, sort of generation of readers. And, with all that new technology is coming back, I'd hate to say vintage. I mean, I'm not even 20, but, to me, it's sort of vintage. But buying the first or second prints of old books, like I've got I just went to a local bookstore and picked up a copy of Papillon by Henri Charrière's, the translation of the French book. And it's got the original cover, and all the pages are yellowed, and I'm curled up, in my reading spot, having to be ever so careful so the thing doesn't crumble in my hands. But, it's that, I can get the smell of the old book, or I can download it and go on my e-reader or on my computer or something like that. But it's very accessible, and there's really something for everyone.
Yeah, Jim and I, being fresh out of our 20s, can relate to the whole vintage comparison. I laugh when the things are it's actually really funny, because a lot of times I'll forget my age and stuff like that, but I'll laugh when things that are coming in that are retro or cool, and I'm like, wait, we were there when they were around the first time. Like, I owned those things. I might have them still.
I have, well, back in my house, I have, I say old copies just because, the pages are yellowed, but that's before acid-free paper. But I have my dad's version of The Invisible Man, where the binding is broken, and, my mom's got the bell jar, and, just nice books. And it was in her library when she was a girl, but for me, that was days of yore. So
I still
back in the olden days, yeah.
I still have like novels from when I was a kid that were some of my favorites. It's funny because you mentioned being on a budget and stuff. There's a lot of stuff I've sold at like used bookstores and things like that, to kind of buy a new book or something to be able to read, and continue reading. But there were certain things, and it becomes a handful of things that you don't part with that are the ones that are like the most important to you that you held on to. And it's funny that, I look through my library and you can definitely see which ones had the biggest mark for me that they're still there, that I still end up having them with all the things I have sold over the years, just because you need to, when you don't have the budget, you start looking at like, okay, I can unload this, but this I won't let go.
Yeah.
I'm going back in the fire for this one.
Yeah. Well, and I've got that love for Terry Pratchett. He did. I remember as a kid, I sat on my dad's lap and he read us The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents, and he did all the voices that I know Dad's gonna kill me for this later and give me a text and say, whatever. But he'd do all the voices of the mice. We had the different mouse characters and the cat and stuff. And, when you've got 6-year-olds who you're reading this stuff to about talking cats and mice and, weird stuff, Mystic Mojo going on, it's one of those things of like your kids look up to you, it's like, okay, I have to do the voices for this one. I can't just read this regularly. But it's, it's like that kind of stuff that I remember. And that's why, somewhere down the line, when I eventually have kids, that's one of the books that I'm going to read to them and say, now they can all snuggle up on my lap and I promise I'll do the voice of the mouse and, stuff like that. So it's it's about the book, but it's also about, the reading of the book. So if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely makes sense to us.
And knowing my brother the way I do, I bet you he probably still could do the voices. He probably still remembers what voices he used for those different characters, because it probably was just as important to him as it was to you, because that's, that is a cool, like, kind of fatherly moment that you have with your kids, and it's the fact that you still remember it to this day is really awesome.
Yeah, well, and when I was visiting my cousins, with my younger cousins, I read stuff to them, and I told them a story version. I was trying to be creative, but I was also just stealing from literature. I told them a story version of, I think it was Romeo and Juliet, except everybody lived happily ever after. Because it's like, they're 6. You're not going to tell them, they killed themselves and everybody's sad. But, I told them like a story version of Shakespeare and stuff like that. And, when Juliet's talking, I did the high-pitched voice of, oh, Romeo, this is great. And, when the priest came in and I did the lower, like, Romeo, what are you doing? This is crazy. And it's that kind of thing of just, you just want to share it with them, so. And, when they actually read Romeo and Juliet, they'll say, well, what the heck is this? My cousin told me they all live happily ever after. My life is a lie.
Well, you did the Romeo and Juliet version.
Oh, okay. Did I? I didn't see Romeo and Juliet. I did the kid-friendly version.
Yeah. Well, that's, that actually was a funny animated movie because I'm a Shakespeare fan, and so when it came out, I was like, what? And They did a really great version of it, and they made it completely kid friendly, and it was a fun movie.
Yeah, I hate to spoil it for the listeners, but they all die at the end. So for all of you not familiar with Romeo and Juliet,
it's not a love story. It's a tragedy.
The Titanic sinks, Hamlet dies, Romeo and Juliet are sad. But, and for all you fun people out there, the We Free Men I really enjoyed. They're not Smurfs. Smurf is the wrong word, but they're kind of like, they're Irish, kind of mischievous Smurfs, I guess, but they have, magic stuff. And, and there's witches, and there's fairy tale characters, and, there's all sorts of fun stuff going on. And that was one that you just have to, when you've got the little Mac McFeagle, you've just got to do the voices. Of one of them is, you've got, I forget what the names of, but they've all got odd voices.
Yeah, not even vaguely familiar with that one.
It's another Terry Pratchett one.
Okay.
And he's done a great job with characters and, making it fun, but still making it fun for, for those of us who are older than 10. So, it's one of those, really any and all ages. So
I got introduced to Terry Pratchett. I had friends of mine that were just raving Discworld and said that, hey, you need to just get into this guy's material. And you're right about him. I think he works on a variety of different levels. Like, I would be interested to go back now and reread some of his books that I read in the past to see if I relate to them in a different way, if I get something different out of them, just being that I'm older now and have been through different things, just because it was such fun material. But I do think that I would read them differently now, just because, I'm in a different place now than I was then, and I would love to go back through and do that experience, because he was just the stories are just brilliant.
Well, yeah, and I was having that discussion with some of my college friends. My Little Pony has become huge with the high school college scene. Well, and even, there's like 40-year-olds that are, die-hard My Little Pony fans. And we were having a discussion of, you see a lot of underlying stuff, a lot of deeper themes when you read it, 2 or 3 times, when you read it when you're a lot older, and when you read it multiple times, you get to see some of that underlying stuff coming out. When I first read We Free Men, it was a lot of fun and stuff. And then, as I started thinking about it and talking about it, there's cultural stuff, there's political stuff, and it's still, very enjoyable, but it's something completely different,
That's one of the things that I think is great when you have people to talk about reading material, is that you're going to get their experience with it, because they're going to come at it from a different place. Just because their experiences are going to be different. Maybe what they've read previously is going to be different. Maybe not reading something that you've read makes it different for them. So it's always great. Well, it's, our discussions, Jim, a lot of times on the show relate from that, because sometimes I'm walking in with a lot of biases because I've read certain histories of a character and I'm thinking a certain way, and because you've got a fresh perspective, you'll see it completely differently than I will, which it makes it a lot of fun. And that's one of the great things, I think, about more and more book groups.
You won't get away from me this time, Buster.
Once again, sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can pick up Arrow number 7 for only $2.39. You can also pick up Batwing number 20 for $1.79. Remember that DCBService.com is your comic book pre-order source. They are a Comixology and iVerse Media digital partner. What that means is you earn 5% of those purchases if you link them to your DCB service account towards your DCB service order. It doesn't cost you anything more to do that, and you're helping out a show sponsor. So make sure to go to our website and click on the handy-dandy links and go and support our show sponsors. They've been terrific for us. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to shout out Batwing's Trade Paperback Volume 1, The Lost Kingdom. This is the first collection starring Batwing, the African-born hero introduced in the pages of Batman Incorporated. What can a soldier in the service of Batman Incorporated do when he's met his match in a murderous massacre? And this is regularly $14.99. It's 45% off, only $8.24. Remember, InStockTrades.com gives you free shipping on orders of $50 or more, so it's a great way to stock up on things and do this incredible bundle. I'm looking at the Untold Tales of Spider-Man Omnibus hardcover, just for an example. It's a $99 hardcover that's 45% off, only $54.99. This was wonderful. If you've never read this one, it's done by Kurt Busiek, and I absolutely love his work, and it was just a great take on Spider-Man. They also have the Batman hardcover, Night of the Owls, from the New 52. It's $29.99 regularly, 45% off, only $16.49. So it's a great way to bundle up and stock up and save some money on these wonderful trade paperbacks and hardcovers that you may be looking for. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We will have voicemails back next episode. I want to shout out our Facebook group, Google+, Twitter, RagingBullets.com. We are available on all those social media platforms. If you go to our website, you can find out how to get to the links to that. I want to particularly shout out our Facebook group, though. We have a very active Facebook group that is very lively. We've got some great discussions going on there all the time. I want to thank everyone that participates in the Facebook group. It's just a wonderful community of people, and I genuinely enjoy talking with everyone over there. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be doing the Raging Oscars. This will be our 7-year anniversary episode. We actually have 2 big anniversaries we're celebrating over the next month. One of them is episode 350, and the other one is our 7-year anniversary show. The first one, episode 346, is going to be the Raging Oscars. And what Jim and I are going to do is we're going to be taking a line by line, because the New 52 is kind of divided up into lines, like a Superman line, a Batman line, a Justice League line. And we break up all of, the Supernatural line with Justice League Dark, stuff like that, Swamp Thing, Animal Man. We break up the whole New 52 line by line, and we're going to be talking about, the order that we're kind of really enjoying the books and themes that are going on. So it's not just going to be books, it's also going to be themes that have been going on since the New 52 started. Some wishes that we have for the line, maybe some things that we wished had gone a little differently. So it's going to be kind of a comprehensive overview on what we thought worked really well and what we'd like to see in the future from the New 52. So that's the Raging Oscars, which will be next week, and we will see you then.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan. What you do to me, Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see, Hawkman, your plan, what you do to me, Hawkman, talking about Hawkman.